Chapter 321, Fierce Fight. Instant Sword Technique. The moment the thought crossed Nathan's mind, his wind nature chakra coalesced into a shimmering emerald aura that wrapped around him. In the next heartbeat, he accelerated with astonishing speed, his figure blurring into an afterimage as he launched himself straight at Terumi Mei. Not this move again. Watching from the edge of the battlefield, Master Ching clenched his fists. If Terumi Mei failed to react in time, Nathan would surely exploit the opening. But Terumi Mei was ready. With reflexes honed by endless training, she swept her blade in a defensive arc just as Nathan's strike arrived. A sharp whine of steel tore through the air. To her alarm, Terumi Mei saw Nathan's attack split into two distinct slashes, each slicing through a different instant of time. His usual single-strike precision had doubled, two Nathan-speed blows crashing toward her at once. A cold tingle ran across Terumi Mei's scalp. She knew Nathan couldn't normally strike twice in the same moment. Only one explanation remained. Her perception was being manipulated. Was this the work of a shadow clone jutsu? She stiffened, eyes narrowing as she readied herself for the true assault beneath the illusion. Without a moment's hesitation, Mei Terumi dropped back and narrowly avoided the sword's arc. Nathan's brow furrowed as his blade sliced through empty air. He pressed chakra into the soles of his feet, and with a thunderous roar, the ocean's surface exploded beneath him. Waves fanned out in every direction, propelling him forward at breathtaking speed. "Damn, kid," Mei Terumi hissed, bracing himself. He raised a kunai just as Nathan lunged again. The clash of steel rang out when sword met kunai, metal screeching in protest. Nathan twisted his wrist, shifting from a downward chop to a sweeping horizontal slash. Mei Terumi leaned back, the blade whistling past his shoulder. Nathan's eyes sparked with determination. He snapped his left hand into a seal and unleashed his ninjutsu. Fire style, great fireball technique. A small flame burst from his mouth, swelling instantly into a roaring fireball that hurtled toward Mei Terumi. The fireball exploded on contact, engulfing Mei Terumi in searing heat. "Ah!" he screamed, recoiling from the blast. Nathan ignored the warning and turned his gaze to the sea ahead. In an instant, the water's surface erupted, and a colossal water dragon burst from the waves, soaring into the sky. It lowered its massive head, locking onto him, then lunged straight at its target. A direct hit from a creature that size would surely cripple, or even kill him. Without hesitation, Nathan activated his flash body technique and sprang backward. The dragon struck the ocean like a meteor, gouging a huge crater as towering walls of water rippled outward with devastating force. To avoid the blast, Nathan retreated again, putting distance between himself and the collapsing waves. After a few tense breaths, the sea felt eerily calm. Nathan peered across the water and saw Mei Terumi rise from the depths, standing unharmed on the surface. His fire style, great fireball technique, had done nothing to slow her down. Her earlier scream, he realized, had been nothing more than a clever distraction. Nathan froze for a moment, his eyes widening as he took in Mei Terumi's torn clothing and the faint scorch marks on her skin. His fireball hadn't completely overwhelmed her. Her lightning-fast reflexes had spared her from serious harm. In fact, she'd used water release, water clone technique to evade, sacrificing only a bit of skin in the process, then slipped into the river for cover. From there, she struck back with water release, water dragon bullet technique, driving him off even if it hadn't caused him much pain. Now they stood apart, each catching their breath. Mei Terumi's strength lay firmly in her ninjutsu. Her physical prowess was respectable, but it was her dual bloodline abilities that truly set her apart. Anticipating Nathan's next move, she began to weave her hands into seals. The mist, arling around her, hardened into scalding steam. Boiling style, fog of skillful intent, she called, and a churning cloud of blistering vapors erupted from the river's surface. Nathan's hair dampened with steam as the seething mist closed in, the humid air burning his lungs. He braced himself, ready to face the full force of Mei Terumi's signature jutsu. Boiling style is born from fusing water nature and earth nature chakra, giving Shinobi the power to superheat chakra into scalding steam. Yet no two users employ it in quite the same way. Take Han, the Five Tails Jinchuriki of Iwakure. He channels his steam to bolster raw strength and speed, turning each vaporous exhalation into a physical edge. Mei Terumi, however, elevates the art to a more sinister plane. She can dial up the steam's acidity on a whim, corroding nearly anything it touches. Even the skeletal armor of a Susanoo won't withstand her corrosive miasma for long. When Nathan spotted that roiling wall of blistering white mist advancing, he didn't hesitate. Feet scraping against the ground, he pulled back into a defensive stance, fingers weaving hand seals. Wind style. Great breakthrough, he called. In an instant, a fierce gale erupted around him. Turbulent air currents ripped upward, snatching seawater from the shoreline and hurling it at the encroaching acid fog. Saltwater droplets hissed and steamed on contact, neutralizing the corrosive cloud and buying Nathan precious seconds to regroup. As the mist recoiled, he braced himself for whatever would come next. Nathan watched as Mei Terumi's acid-charged mist slammed into the sea. The seawater immediately neutralized its corrosiveness, and a sudden gust of wind kept the fumes from drifting back toward her. Sadly, the fish that had taken refuge in the ocean's depths were not so fortunate. Many of them perished in the toxic cloud. Within moments, the white haze dispersed, and Nathan stood unscathed on the shoreline. Mei Terumi did not waver. Locking her gaze on Nathan, she wove another precise hand seal. Water style, water formation pillar, she chanted. Instantly, vast amounts of water chakra coalesced into a churning sphere and hurtled at Nathan with brutal force. Reading the attack, Nathan darted to one side, letting the sphere slam into the sea instead. Boom! The impact sent a towering wall of seawater surging outward, drenching everything in its path. Nathan had scarcely finished registering the threat when the sea itself seemed to revolt. Mei Terumi's jutsu, powerful enough on dry ground to extinguish even Madara Uchiha's great fire annihilation, now manifested in her ocean domain. Almost instantly, a wall of water over 10 meters high surged toward him. Nathan dashed backward, but the torrent advanced at impossible speed. With the sea roaring at his heels, he knew he couldn't outpace it on foot. Summoning his chakra, he leapt, borrowing momentum from the wind and the wave itself, to land on its crest. For a breathless moment, he balanced atop the churning mass, 10 meters above the sea's dark depths. Then he saw her, Mei Terumi, standing firm mid the chaos, lips parting as she expelled a shimmering, jade-hued globule of liquid. Nathan's heart skipped. Dissolution, he whispered. He recognized it instantly. Dissolution was Mei's second Kekkei Genkai, a rare fusion of earth and water chakra. The substance was maddeningly sticky, corrosive enough to eat through armor and flesh alike, and once it clung to you, there was no easy escape. Faced with that oozing green hazard, Nathan knew his next moves would have to be flawless. Mei Terumi timed her technique perfectly, unleashing it just before Nathan could reveal himself. In that instant, Nathan was struck by a wave of impending danger. Nathan didn't hesitate. He pushed his 3 Tomoe Sharingan to its limit, and in an instant, the world around him slowed to a crawl. Seizing the moment, he swept his arms up, formed the seals in a blur, and unleashed his ninjutsu, water release, water array wall. A towering curtain of seawater sprang up around him, shielding him from harm. But Terumi Mei was ready. She spat out a jet of corrosive mucus that hissed against the water barrier. A high-pitched sizzle rang out as the wall dissolved and washed back into the ocean almost instantly. Even so, it had bought Nathan the precious seconds he needed. With no time to lose, he spun on his heel and began to fall back. Terumi Mei wasn't about to let him slip away. She closed the distance in 2 strides, forming hand seals in mid-pursuit. Then, with a single thrust of her palm into the sea, she imparted massive water chakra and caused the water itself to fracture into thousands of razor-sharp arrows. Without warning, the deadly volley arcs toward Nathan, each glinting shaft aiming to pin him in place. Swish! Nathan's face remained calm as the wind-whipping hiss of slicing air cut through the clearing. He pushed his Sharingan to its limit, spinning his long sword in a relentless arc. Ping! Ping! Dang! Dang! Each incoming water arrow shattered against the blade's whirlwind force. Humph! Mei Terumi sneered. With no hesitation, she formed another hand seal and invoked a fresh-water ninjutsu. The attack resembled Senju Tobirama's advanced water style, water-cutting wave, a single razor-sharp jet of water fired straight from the mouth. Yet Mei Terumi's version lacked Tobirama's continuous flow, and Nathan's 3 Tomoe Sharingan allowed him to sidestep it with ease. Before he could retaliate, Mei Terumi's fingers danced through the air again, sealing her next assault. Water style. Water dragon bullet technique. Nathan could see exactly what his opponent was planning. Duplicate the blitzkrieg that had overwhelmed his shadow clone, an unrelenting barrage of large-scale attacks designed to keep him perpetually dodging, expose his weaknesses, and deliver the finishing blow. But Nathan wasn't about to play along. He carried the clone's memories, after all, and refused to repeat its mistakes. Besides, the clone itself had never dared to trade blows directly. Its chakra reserves were too meager to outlast such a fierce assault, and even at Shadow Clone Technique Level 4, its stability markedly improved, it still couldn't withstand sustained punishment. It would inevitably be ground down and defeated. Nathan's real body was different. True, his chakra was somewhat drained from the long journey, but he had an army of mist shinobi backing him, and the chakra absorption technique in his arsenal. He welcomed the fight. As the original, he could afford to take risks the clone couldn't, and with his level 8 Palm Fairy technique in effect, ordinary attacks would barely faze him. His opponent's strategy would backfire before it even began. Nathan knew it was a fool's errand to think his opponent could beat him by destroying a mere shadow clone, no matter how many escape jutsu she tried. As the roaring water dragon jutsu bore down on him, he let his guard drop. With a sharp clang, his blade slid into its sheath. He formed the seals in a blur, drew a deep breath, and unleashed his own ninjutsu. Fire escape, dragon blaze technique. A ribbon of scorching flame burst from his mouth and instantly coalesced into a sinuous fire dragon. It charged upward, trailing a wave of searing heat, and struck the oncoming water serpent head-on. The impact boomed like thunder. Steam and spray exploded outward as fire and water met, then rained down in hissing droplets. The sheer power of each jutsu was perfectly balanced. Mist and leaf shinobi alike froze in astonishment. Water release should dominate fire, yet here the two elemental dragons were evenly matched. For a moment, the entire arena lay hushed under that unexpected stalemate. In the world of ninjutsu, techniques that blend two chakra natures naturally heck and restrain one another. Fire and water stand at opposite ends of the spectrum. Water extinguishes flame, while fire can evaporate water. Unless a fire user wields a more advanced art or marshals a far greater reserve of chakra, they will always be at a disadvantage. In theory, Terumi Mei's water escape, water dragon bullet technique should have overwhelmed Nathan's fire escape, dragon fire technique. Mei's jutsu was technically superior, and both combatants drew from nearly identical chakra pools. Yet in practice, their clash remained perfectly even, a fact that stunned every onlooker. The only plausible explanation lay in Nathan's exceptional mastery of his own art. Though his fire technique ranks lower on the official scale, his intimate understanding and precise control of the dragon fire technique allowed him to neutralize Mei's advantage and fight her blow for blow. What looked like a mismatch on paper became an utterly balanced duel in execution, proving that true skill can overturn even the strictest elemental laws. Terumi Mei might be a prodigy who picks up ninjutsu in a flash, but without demonic levels of talent or a huge stroke of luck, she can't hope to perfect her techniques. Nathan, by contrast, operates under entirely different rules. Thanks to his proficiency panel, he may need dozens or even hundreds of tries to learn a new jutsu, but if he's willing to invest the time and effort, he will eventually master it flawlessly. And perfect means far more than a one-rank boost on a skill sheet. It raises the technique's true ceiling. For example, any C-rank jutsu or below that Nathan has perfected can be cast almost instantaneously, granting him the split-second advantage needed to strike back. Flawless mastery also means he knows every nuance of the art, how much chakra to use, where to apply it, even how to suppress the technique to achieve unexpected effects, like shifting a massive boulder with minimal exertion. Those are the precise advantages that allowed Nathan to turn the tables in his last encounter, even when he appeared to be at a severe disadvantage. Though it would take too long to explain every detail, the simple fact was this: whatever Nathan thought, Mei Terumi could predict. She grasped that gap far more clearly than the stunned onlookers around her, and her face grew even darker. She had already known Nathan's swordsmanship was fearsome. It had earned him the moniker Ghost Sword, after all. But what unraveled before her now was on another level entirely. Until now, Nathan had performed a handful of ninjutsu, impressive feats, especially when he formed a hand seal with a single finger, but he held back. In that instant, however, he unleashed everything he had. The explosion of chakra, the precision of his movements, the raw power, it was as if she'd been struck by lightning. Retreat? The thought flashed through Mei Terumi's mind like a warning. They had spent months planning this raid on Konoha's forward base in the Land of Waves. If they withdrew now, Nathan and the others could imitate the pullback of a larger force and escape, but the risk of failure, of being branded cowards or traitors, would be catastrophic. For a heartbeat, Mei Terumi teetered on the brink of a decision that could cost them everything. Chapter 323, Retreat. Nathan's Sharingan flared to life, instantly reading the hesitation in Terumi Mei's eyes. He paid it no mind. Breaking the surface of the sea until he was level with her, he lunged forward without a second thought. As he closed the distance, his hands flew into precise hand seals, and he unleashed his ninjutsu, fire release, phoenix fire technique. A blazing orb erupted from his mouth, streaking toward Terumi Mei like a fiery meteor. To boost its deadlines, Nathan hurled several shuriken into the inferno, trapping the blades in the heart of the searing sphere. The fireball hurtled toward her, shuriken concealed within, intent on catching her off guard. Terumi Mei didn't falter. With a swift retreat, she traced her own hand seals and called forth a towering wall of water. Just before the flaming sphere could strike, she solidified her barrier, water release, water array wall, to blunt the deadly assault. The searing fire collided with the roaring torrent, sending hissing steam skyward as Nathan's attack was stymied by her swift defenses. Nathan not only deflected the enemy's ninjutsu, treating it as a magical assault, but also stopped the shuriken hidden inside as a physical strike. He hadn't minded. That was exactly the point of the maneuver. By intercepting both attacks, he'd drawn close, and now his plan had come to fruition. With a metallic clang, he drew his longsword and stepped in front of Terumi Mei, igniting another swing. His blade glittered in the dim light, grazing her gaze with its cold promise. "No," Terumi Mei murmured, finally snapping back to full awareness. She abandoned any attempt to track the sword directly and relied on pure reflex, twisting aside and bringing her own weapon up in a block. For a tense moment, they were locked, Nathan's blade against her defenses, their movements a deadly dance of steel. But Terumi Mei sensed she was losing ground. Through gritted teeth and a burst of agony in her left arm, she forced distance between them. In a heartbeat, she formed her hand seals with lightning speed, unleashing her bloodline ninjutsu, dissolution style. Monster Dissolver. A noxious, sticky ichor erupted from her palms, spraying in Nathan's direction with a hissing roar. The foul stench filled the air as the viscous liquid hurtled toward his face. Nathan didn't hesitate. As the corrosive blast hissed toward him, he rolled aside and, channeling wind chakra, unleashed his instant sword technique. In the blink of an eye, he closed the gap on Terumi Mei. But Mei was no novice. With a swift flick of her wrist, she conjured several kunai from thin air and scattered them in a deadly arc toward Nathan's vital points. His Sharingan eyes spun, tracing each blade's trajectory. A flash of emerald light swept over him, and he invoked the instant sword technique again and again, slicing through the incoming kunai just in time. His evasions, however, only served Mei's purpose. As Nathan deflected her projectiles, she quietly slipped backward, putting distance between them. Without warning, she activated her signature move, Dissolution Escape, Dissolution Technique, and sent another wave of corrosive energy at him. Nathan could do nothing but dodge, once more dancing on the edge of her attack. The battle became a tense duel of advance and retreat, each fighter responding to the other's moves like two kites tugging at opposite ends of a string. Minute after minute passed. At last, Mei Terumi's composure began to crack. Nathan's approach to battle stood in stark contrast to Mei Terumi's. He leaned heavily on his swordsmanship, only occasionally resorting to ninjutsu and illusions, while Mei had fought almost entirely with ninjutsu, striving to exploit her strengths and hide her vulnerabilities. Inevitably, their chakra reserves drained at very different rates, and the victor was never in doubt. Panting for breath, Mei Terumi steadied herself atop the restless waves, bruises mottling her arms and legs. Across the swaying sea, Nathan remained unscathed. His robes were torn, but his body bore no visible wounds. It wasn't that he had emerged physically untouched. Anyone who had witnessed their clash would know otherwise, but Nathan's newly refined palm fairy technique had already closed every gash and broken bone. One fighter rose, the other fell. The contrast between them could not have been clearer, and it pained May to acknowledge the truth in her exhaustion-choked glare. Yet despite her fierce pride, she knew she had no choice but to yield. Terumi May had no more room for hesitation. Embarrassment aside, there was only one choice now: retreat. She scanned the battlefield's perimeter. 10 minutes had slipped by since Nathan's unexpected absence had given her the upper hand, and in that time, her advantage had evaporated. If they stayed any longer, they'd be cut down, and their comrades would have no chance of escape. Steeling herself, she fell back toward the field's edge, dropping into a crouch beside Nathan. Though his breathing was labored and his chest wound crudely bandaged, the bleeding had been staunched, and he'd regained just enough strength to move. Terumi May caught his eye and made a clear, urgent motion: pull back. Nathan didn't hesitate. He produced a small whistle and blew it once, the sharp notes slicing through the clash of steel and shouts. At that signal, every mist ninja on the field froze, and then, as if one mind guided them all, began to fall back in perfect formation. Terumi May and Nathan slipped away together, leading their forces safely from the killing ground. Uchiha Tihuo and Kanda Yinge fell back to Nathan's side, breathless. "Captain?" Tihuo panted. "Shall we give chase?" Nathan followed their gaze toward the east, where Terumi May's squad was disappearing over the dunes, straight in the direction the Mist Village warships had sailed, and toward Konoha's forward base in the Land of Waves. It was obvious. May and her team intended to link up with the Mist's main force. On the open sea, they had no choice but to board one of the 4 transports if they hoped to return safely. Rumor had it their ultimate goal was to launch a rear assault on Kirigakure. It was a daring plan, perhaps too daring, but it meant heading for the same battlefield where the main conflict was about to erupt. Nathan swept his eyes across the aftermath of the skirmish. Only 21 shinobi from Konoha remained standing, and every one of them was wounded. In their present state, a direct pursuit was out of the question. Even if they caught the fleeing ninja, they'd lack the strength to stop them. Reluctantly, Nathan shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "We need to help our people first, then we'll consider our next move." Nathan knew that if they ran into the enemy's reinforcements, the situation would only get worse. After a moment's thought, he decided they needed to rest before resuming the chase. Uchiha Tihuo humbly relaxed at his decision. Clearly, they hadn't wanted to pursue immediately. Noticing their relief, Nathan issued his orders. "Tihuo, Ying, get me a full count of our losses and a detailed report on everyone's injuries. If anyone's condition is serious, send them to me right away." "Yes, Captain," they answered in unison and hurried off. Nathan watched their backs for a moment, then turned toward the reef's sentry tower. Ignoring the blood and bodies littering the ground, he found a relatively clean patch of coral, sat down, and closed his eyes. The endless march and relentless fighting had drained him completely. He simply had to rest, and that was precisely why he'd refused to press the pursuit without pause. Chapter 324, The Main Battlefield. Half an hour later, Nathan opened his eyes. Around him, about 20 shinobi were either squatting or standing in near silence. Some sat cross-legged with eyes shut, suturing their strength for the next clash. Others popped ration pills to restore the chakra they'd expended, and a few more meticulously cleaned their kunai, shuriken, and wire threads, anything to gain an edge when the fighting resumed. At the sound of stirring, every head turned toward him. Nathan rose to his feet, face calm and resolute, and let his gaze sweep over the gathered warriors. Finally, it settled on 3 figures lying motionless at the camp's periphery. All 3 were wrapped in white bandages, their faces ashen. Though only moments before he had stabilized their injuries with his level 8 Palm Immortal technique, they still appeared half dead. Just minutes earlier, the trio had been on the brink of a fatal strike from a mist ninja. They owed their lives to Terumi May and her retreating squad, who'd stumbled upon them in the nick of time and driven off their pursuer. Now, Though their lives were secured, their battered condition meant they would have to sit out the next engagement. Nathan exhaled slowly. There would be no complaining. Everyone here was worn thin, yet determined. The main battlefield lay ahead, and no matter how dire things looked, they could not afford to falter. With a nod to the wounded, he turned back to his comrades. The battle was only beginning. Nathan knew he couldn't spare anyone to stay behind and guard the tower. Once they moved out, those 3 injured comrades would be on their own. If Mist Ninja reinforcements arrived or any other danger struck, they'd have no means of escape. Bringing the wounded along wasn't an option either. The squad was heading into battle, not on a march. It would only slow them down. He bowed his head for a moment and murmured a silent wish for the 3 men's safety, then straightened and addressed the rest of the team. "All right. Are we ready?" "In position," they replied together. "Good," Nathan said, nodding. "Let's move." "Yes, Captain." Without another word, he leapt from the sentry tower, landing lightly on the shallow water below, and charged toward the forward base. One after another, the Konoha ninjas followed, their feet skimming the sea's surface in perfect sync. Behind them, only the 3 gravely wounded shinobi remained, slumped and unconscious in the tower, as Nathan and more than a dozen teammates raced across the waves toward the next stage of their mission. On the far side of the land of waves, the forward base lay engulfed in chaos. Over 400 shinobi from Konoha clashed with their counterparts from the Hidden Mist village, turning the surrounding 2 to 3 kilometer radius into a shambles of steel and screams. At first, Konoha's forces used their knowledge of the terrain and thorough preparations to press an advantage, but that edge quickly vanished. After a deceptive hush, the Mist Shinobi unleashed a surprise all-out assault, committing every available soldier. Despite fighting on unfamiliar ground and being slightly outnumbered, their ferocity flipped the battle. Fortunately, the number 3 watchtower had detected unusual enemy movements in time, giving the base precious moments to shore up defenses before the onslaught. Nathan pressed his shoulder against the cool stone wall of the forward base's command chamber, heart pounding. If the enemy had really slipped in undetected and caught Konoha's defenses flat-footed, things would be far worse than the current skirmishing. In a truly dire scenario, the entire outpost could collapse in an instant, something they had barely managed to avert so far. But the base was running out of time. Once the situation tipped past its breaking point, the damage to Konoha's defenses would skyrocket, and by then it would be too late to mount an effective counterattack. Deep in the heart of the subterranean bunker, Captain Uchiha Ryujin, one of the village's most experienced senior shinobi, Ned the latest battle reports streaming in from the front lines. Each update brought grim news. Enemy infiltration attempts, sudden ambushes, whispered reports of shadows slipping between watchposts. He set his jaw, straightened his high-collared cloak, and turned to the young Chunin, standing nervously by the communication console. "Where is the assault squad that left for Sentry Tower 3? Ryujin's voice was calm but carried an edge of steel. The Chunin swallowed hard and cleared his throat. "Captain, the Jonin squad commanded by Kanda departed not long ago. They reported setting out on schedule." He hesitated, eyes flicking to the crackling monitors. "But," Ryujin's dark eyes narrowed. "Yes." The Chunin's face went pale. "Since they passed the East Ridge, we've lost all contact. No transmissions, no radio replies, nothing." A heavy silence fell. Ryujin closed his eyes, drawing a slow breath to steady himself. Every second without word felt like an eternity. If Kanda's team had run into trouble, if they'd been overwhelmed or flanked, the situation at Tower 3 would collapse, exposing the entire flank to enemy forces. Very well. Ryujin opened his eyes and fixed the young shinobi with a steady glare. "Send word to all movable units. We launch a support mission at first light. Prepare rapid response teams, and post every available sensor and messenger we have around the perimeter. Understood?" The Chunin snapped to attention. "Yes, Captain. Right away." As the Chunin rushed off to relay orders, Nathan stepped forward, voice low. "Captain, if they're cut off out there, they'll need help fast. Can we spare more reinforcements?" Ryujin gave him a grim nod. "I'm assigning you to lead the second wave. You'll move out at dawn with whoever's left fresh. Konoha's safety depends on it." Nathan's grip tightened on his forehead protector. Understood. I won't let you down. Outside the command chamber, the flickering lamplight cast long shadows over the base's corridors. Every footstep echoed with urgency. Every whispered order burned with resolve. Time was running out, but as long as Konoha's shinobi could gather their strength, there was still hope to turn the tide. The third watchtower was attacked not long ago. Now, fewer than 20 shinobi remain in that unit, and every one of them is injured. Even if we send reinforcements immediately and carry out the mission perfectly, I doubt it will turn the tide. He phrased it politely enough, but in his heart he thought it was hopeless. At that, the Uchiha Jonin chuckled softly. That may be true for just anyone, he said, but Uchiha Nathan is not just anyone. Ghost Sword Nathan? The Konoha Chunin ventured, brow furrowed. Exactly, the Jonin confirmed. Most people dismiss his feats as clan propaganda. They have no idea how much we've actually downplayed him. Take the ambush led by the 3 ninja swordsmen. Nathan walked away with hardly a scratch. He even had enough chakra afterward to tend to his injured comrades. If that doesn't prove his strength, I don't know what does. With that, the room fell silent. They all understood. If Nathan was on the way, there was still hope. Based on his past exploits, the Uchiha Jonin was convinced that if Nathan pushed himself, his combat power could climb even higher. And though fewer than 20 shinobi remained in Sentry Tower 3, the Jonin's expectations were through the roof, if only for Nathan. As for the others, he frankly didn't care. All he wanted was for Nathan to arrive as soon as possible. The entire front was teetering on a knife's edge. Once Nathan appeared, his mere presence would rally allied morale and throw the enemy's assault off kilter. The Jonin believed, no, he knew, that the Uchiha prodigy could turn the tide. Nathan, however, had no idea how much was riding on his shoulders. Even now, he was making his way across the battlefield toward the tower, unaware of the hopes pinned on him. The first reinforcements to reach the field were led by Mei Terumi and her squad. After reporting to the Mizukage, she was given new orders: take a detachment and intercept any ninja, Nathan among them, who tried to break through to Sentry Tower 3. Nathan had already anticipated that their quarry would fall back to the main battlefield, and that word of his forces would eventually leak out. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. So, when his squad closed to within 5 kilometers of the forward base, he quietly veered them onto a different course, the very path he'd once used to slip undetected from the base to the reef sentry tower. That clever detour let them circumvent Mei Terumi's blockade without ever drawing attention. Chapter 325, Rescue. 20 minutes later, Nathan led his squad to the forward base. Instantly, the air filled with the clash of metal, the anguished cries of wounded shinobi, the thunderous blasts of exploding talismans, and the frantic shouts of combatants. Every man in Nathan's dozen sensed the danger. He activated his Sharingan, sweeping his gaze across the chaotic battlefield, then called out sharply, "Stay close. Don't lose sight of me." "Understood, Captain." They answered in unison. Nathan raised 3 fingers in silent count, then folded them one by one. On the last fold, he sprang from cover and charged toward the fighting. Without hesitation, his team followed. The sudden onslaught caught the mist ninjas off guard. Several fell before they could even raise their weapons, and their formation shattered in an instant. At the same time, the Konoha shinobi pinned down in the center of the melee seized the opportunity. As Nathan's squad pierced the enemy lines, those allied ninjas broke free, rallying behind him. Bolstered by their rescue effort, Nathan pressed forward, determination burning in his eyes. With each step, the wounded found hope, the trapped gained allies, and the tide of battle began to shift. In the midst of smoke and gunpowder, one thing was clear. Nathan and his team had arrived, and nowhere on that battlefield would injustice go unchallenged. Nathan led the charge, 3 sentry squads fanning out behind him on either side. Like a living arrowhead, he slammed into the heart of the battlefield. With his level 7 swordsmanship, level 5 illusion swordsmanship, and 3 fully evolved Magatama Sharingan eyes, Nathan fought like a war god, unstoppable and merciless. Every Mist Village ninja in his path, Chunin or Genin, fell before his blade. The hidden mist had indeed sent elite Jonin to counter the assault, but Nathan had picked his target wisely, areas where their high-ranking forces were few. Meanwhile, Konoha's own Jonin held back the rest of the enemy, giving Nathan free rein to wreak havoc. Agonized screams filled the air as he cut down one shinobi after another. Between strikes, he unleashed his chakra absorption technique, draining fallen foes to restore his own reserves. Even when he paused briefly at the 3rd sentry tower to feed on the stolen chakra, it wasn't to rest, but to steel himself for the next onslaught. Relentlessly, he dove back into the fray. Nathan had spent the last 30 minutes stationed at the 3rd sentry tower before dashing here in 20. All the while, he maintained the chakra refining technique to rebuild his chakra. The long-distance raid and relentless skirmishes had taken their toll. He was still far from his peak strength. Yet when the chance presented itself, he wasn't about to let it slip away. He wrapped his right hand in chakra, seized a mistnin by the throat, and siphoned off the dying ninja's chakra in the final seconds of his life. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent the corpse hurtling toward another mistnin who was charging in to block him. Up to that point, he'd already cut down nearly 10 opponents in rapid succession. Finally, a special Jonin managed to free his hands in an attempt to stop him. But no amount of rank or skill could match Nathan's speed. The Jonin caught sight of his comrade's body crashing toward him and dove aside. As he refocused on Nathan, he saw green light flare along the blade in Nathan's hand and swirl around Nathan's form, and in the blink of an eye, Nathan stood before him. Huh? The Kirigakure special Jonin froze in mid-stride, surprise flashing across his face. As he stumbled backward, he threw a kunai with all his might. The blade whistled toward Nathan's heart, but Nathan's Sharingan flared to life, the crimson tomoe tracking the weapon's every move. In an instant, emerald chakra surged around him as he unleashed his instant sword technique, twisting aside to let the kunai sail harmlessly past and vaulting forward in one fluid motion. Yet instead of appearing in front of his opponent, Nathan rematerialized at the Jonin's right flank. The Jonin barely had time to turn when Nathan's insight, honed by the Sharingan, revealed the precise moment to strike. With a low whisper of chakra, Nathan activated the long-prepared magical shackle technique. Suddenly, iron-like bonds of chakra shot out, slamming into the Jonin's limbs and torso. The Jonin's eyes widened in shock and pain, as though colossal steel spikes had pierced him from every direction. He crumpled to his knees, utterly immobilized, trapped by Nathan's inexorable chakra shackles. Uchiha Nathan! The Kirigakure special Jonin, eyes widening in the final moments of his life, let out one last grudging shout as if invoking Nathan's name would somehow change his fate. Nathan paid him no mind. With a swift motion, he rammed his long knife into the Jonin's lower abdomen. The wound was grievous but not instantly lethal, and Nathan seized the opening. He formed hand seals and activated the chakra absorption technique. A pale stream of chakra blossomed from his palm and encircled the fallen ninja's throat. Almost immediately, the Jonin's chakra flooded into Nathan's system, coursing along his meridians before transmuting into fresh reserves of his own energy. Nathan slipped a glance at his status panel. The chakra absorption technique was now 70% of the way toward level 5, and with over 1,000 proficiency points banked, he was already eligible to promote it to level 6. At that rank, his absorption speed would increase even further. By then, this new technique could easily double as a deadly offensive move. Just imagine it, draining an opponent's chakra the moment you touch them. It sounded terrifying. Nathan knew, however, that in a real fight, it would only work on mid-level shinobi. No Jonin would let him get that close long enough for the effect to take hold. All kinds of scenarios raced through his mind as he relaxed his palm. The Jonin he'd targeted crumpled silently to the ground, completely drained of chakra. There was no saving him. Nathan drew his long sword with a soft metallic rasp and swept his gaze across the battlefield. A few Kirigakure Jonin glanced in his direction, suspicion flickering in their eyes. Others shook off entanglements with Konoha Shinobi and charged straight toward him. He didn't have a second to lose. Steeling himself, Nathan dove into the fray, sword flashing in his hand as he plunged back into the killing field. Nathan pressed forward as the newly freed Konoha Shinobi rallied behind him and on both flanks, surging into other hotspots across the field. 2 minutes later, he came to a halt. Before him stood a familiar figure from the hidden mist, a shinobi whose presence at this battle Nathan never expected. At last, a spark of wariness lit Nathan's eyes. "Uchiha brat," the mist ninja drawled. "Word is you took down that no-good Morinosuke. Let's see if your skills live up to the hype." The ninja flashed a grin, revealing a row of unnaturally white teeth. "Name's Kotaro, Kaguya Kotaro, at your service." "Kaguya, huh?" Nathan replied coolly. With a low roar, Kotaro's bones began to crack and lengthen at impossible speed. In moments, razor-sharp spurs and ridges had sprouted all over his body, wrapping him in a grotesque living armor. Nathan recognized the transformation technique immediately. He was facing a seasoned jonin of the Kaguya clan. The real fight was about to begin. Chapter 326, Fight Again, Corpse Veins. Nathan whispered the incantation as the green aura flared along his sword. In an instant, the air rippled, and he unleashed the snap sword technique, reappearing at Kaguya Kotaro's side in a heartbeat. A flash of steel lit the air. Chichichi! The shrill screech of metal on bone rang out as Nathan's blade slashed toward Kotaro's neck. Kotaro instinctively raised his arm, the blow striking his forearm instead. The Kusanagi sword's edge scraped against the jagged bone spurs jutting from the defense, sending sparks flying. But this time, Nathan's rare blade did not falter. With a sharp click, the sword bit cleanly through the bone spurs, scattering fragments to the ground and revealing raw flesh beneath. Blood welled instantly where the spurs once protruded. Yet by the time the spurs fell away, Nathan's momentum had ebbed. His sword sank only through muscle and tendon. It failed to shatter the arm bone as he'd intended. Kotaro gritted his teeth, pain flickering in his eyes, but the bared bone still held firm. Nathan pressed forward, narrowing the distance, determination flashing in his gaze. The battle was far from over. Kotaro's arm throbbed with pain, but he merely licked his lips, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Not bad, Nathan. You've got some skill." But he let out a fierce roar. Never underestimate the power of the Kaguya clan. In an instant, the corpse bone veins beneath his skin flared to life. Jagged spurs of bone burst outward, knitting shattered flesh and broken bone back together. Kotaro leapt backward, creating distance between them, and then, without warning, his 10-finger bones detached and hurtled toward Nathan like deadly projectiles, forcing Nathan to break off his pursuit. Seizing the moment, Kotaro thrust out his left palm. A hilt of white bone erupted from his flesh. He gripped it with his right hand and yanked free a gleaming blade, its surface milky and unblemished. In the blink of an eye, Kotaro stood ready, bone sword in hand, eyes alight with malice. "Boy, I'm going to enjoy this," he snarled. He charged, swinging the bone sword in a swift, brutal arc. Instinctively, Nathan raised his long knife to meet the blow. The clash rang out with a clear, ringing ding! As iron blade met bone, two warriors locked in a deadly, echoing strike. Nathan's long blade, its edge reinforced with wind-release chakra, rang hollow against the bone sword. Even with the elemental enhancement, he couldn't chip a single fracture into his opponent's weapon, an unmistakable testament to its hardness. At that moment, Kotaro Kaguya allowed himself a pleased smirk. "So you're as tough as they say," he murmured, then relaxed his stance and sprang forward. Nathan barely had time to brace himself before Kotaro unleashed a blistering combo. The strikes came at impossible angles, each one seamlessly feeding into the next. Before Nathan could parry the first blow, the second was already crashing down. Watching the relentless assault, Nathan's eyes narrowed. He recognized the pattern. The dance of Tsubaki, one of the Kaguya clan's 6 forbidden corpse vein techniques. Its power lay in an unbroken torrent of attacks, designed to overwhelm an enemy's guard, force a momentary lapse, and deliver the killing strike. But Nathan was no ordinary shinobi. His Sharingan traced every shift in Kotaro's movement. His reflexes snapped into action the instant an opening appeared, and his swordsmanship stood on solid ground. He wouldn't be so easily broken. Steeling himself, Nathan tightened his grip on the hilt. As Kotaro surged forward for another assault, Nathan raised his blade, chakra edge gleaming. The two weapons met with a thunderous clash, sparks showering around them, and Nathan smiled, ready to turn the tide. Clang! 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 The sharp ring of metal on metal echoed in rapid succession, each strike as relentless as a summer downpour. Nathan and Kaguya Kotaro moved at impossible speed, so fast that to anyone watching, their forms blurred into streaks of light and shadow. They circled, lunged, and parried, each testing the other's limits. Minute after minute passed, neither showed any sign of yielding. For 5 grueling minutes they fought without pause, the air humming with the tension of their blades. Then, in a decisive instant, Nathan's long knife slid along Kotaro's bone sword, sending a shower of sparks into the air. Kotaro felt the jarring scrape resonate through his arm, but the spiky bone protrusions on his blade absorbed the worst of the blow. Though unhurt, he knew at once what it meant. He could no longer match Nathan's speed. Kotaro's face twisted with frustration. He had trained for years in the 6 secret arts of the corpse vein, and none served him better than his signature technique, the dance of Chun. To be outmatched at the very skill he had mastered was a devastating blow to his pride. Across from him, Nathan's eyes gleamed with unwavering confidence. He tightened his grip on the long knife and launched his next attack with renewed vigor. Chapter 8. Clash of Bones and Blades. Nathan struck first. He flowed seamlessly from the basic sword technique into the illusion sword technique, then unleashed the instant sword technique, all in the blink of an eye. Blades of light converged on Kaguya Kotaro so fast and furious that he couldn't even draw a steady breath. Each slash threatened to rend him limb from limb, and the dazzling radiance was enough to make anyone's head spin. Still, Kotaro did not fall. Faint ridges of bone thrust through his skin, his corpse bone veins at work, sprouting jagged spines that closed his wounds almost as fast as Nathan's blades opened them. Without that uncanny regeneration, Kotaro would have died long before this moment. Yet even the mightiest ability has its limits. Every bone he formed drained his chakra reserves. If he overtaxed himself, his fearsome marrow would betray him, leaving him as helpless as any ordinary warrior. Assessing the situation, Kotaro abandoned the straightforward exchange of sword skills. With a grim smile, he summoned the full power of his bone manipulation. Ribs cracked and reassembled into a whirling shield, femurs spiraled into bladed whips, and vertebrae snapped into spiky projectiles. He tapped into 5 forbidden secrets of the Kaguya clan, techniques so rare that only he and his legendary cousin, Kaguya Kimimaro, even knew of them. The 6th art, the fabled Dance of Hayabari, remained beyond his reach. It belonged solely to Kimimaro's unmatched mastery. Now it was Kotaro's turn to press the attack. As Nathan readied his next move, he found himself facing an arsenal born of living bone, each deadly trick honed to exploit any crack in his defenses. The tide of battle had shifted. It was bone against blade, chakra against will, and only one would walk away when the dust finally settled. Even with mastery of the 5 secret techniques, Nathan still trailed behind Kaguya Morinosuke, especially when it came to maintaining perfect balance in combat. In his very first encounter with Morinosuke, he'd spent almost the entire fight scrambling to evade her razor-sharp strikes. But now, facing Kaguya Kotaro, he could stand his ground. Kotaro's switches into secret jutsu left momentary openings, and Nathan, armed with the hard-won experience from battling Morinosuke, could turn each of those openings into a counterattack. Kotaro was certainly dangerous, but he simply didn't apply the same relentless pressure. Blade in hand, Nathan saw his chance and struck without hesitation. He slashed to parry Kotaro's incoming strike, then closed the distance in a single step. At the same moment, chakra in his left palm condensed into a dense, whirling sphere, the unmarked ninjutsu known as Rasengan. With a thunderous crack, he drove the spinning orb straight into Kotaro's chest. The explosion of concentrated energy rocked the field, sending Kotaro hurtling backward. Thud! Kaguya Kotaro crashed to the ground, the impact echoing with a series of crackling snaps as the bony spur in his chest shattered. Beneath his armor, Lesh twisted grotesquely, and dark blood seeped out in a curved stain across the dirt. Even with that bone shield in place, Nathan's Rasengan had dealt devastating damage. In truth, Kaguya's only salvation had been the last-second surge of his corpse bone vein, which temporarily hardened the spur and absorbed much of the blow. Without that reinforcement, a level 6 Rasengan from Nathan would have either killed him outright or left him crippled. Yet now, almost impossibly, Kaguya Kotaro was on his feet again, his expression unhurried and unbowed. Chapter 327, Lessons. Very impressive, kid. Truly impressive. Kaguya Kotaro rose to his feet, but instead of launching immediately into another attack, he fixed Nathan with a cold, steady gaze. Then, with a flick of his hand, 3 ninjas from the Kaguya clan, his waiting reinforcements, stepped forward to form a loose circle around our young shinobi. Nathan tracked them in his peripheral vision. 3 chunin, even enhanced by the clan's notorious corpse vein, were hardly enough to worry him. If he could handle Kotaro alone, adding 3 more mid-level ninjas wouldn't change the outcome. At worst, it would cost him a bit more stamina. Kotaro, however, clearly disagreed. No sooner had his subordinates taken their positions than he lunged at Nathan, chakra flaring around his fists. The 3 chunin wasted no time joining the fray. 2 of them broke off immediately and charged Nathan alongside their leader, coordinating their strikes in a swift pincer maneuver. Nathan didn't flinch. Tightening his grip on his kunai, he slid into a defensive stance. As the first 2 ninjas closed in, one aiming a rapid-fire shuriken volley, the other charging in with a kunai in each hand, Nathan exhaled slowly, ready to meet their assault head-on. There would be no shortage of lessons today, but he was determined they'd be teaching him nothing he couldn't handle. From just over 10 meters away, the Kaguya clan shinobi kept firing the corpse bone vein, 10-finger-piercing bullets at Nathan. Each projectile looked little more than a jagged finger of bone, yet the impact rivaled that of 2 chunin in a one-on-one clash. Thanks to his boosted physique attribute and mastery of the palm fairy technique, Nathan's self-healing and regenerative abilities had improved dramatically, but he was still a mortal ninja, vulnerable to real harm. He wouldn't let his guard down for a moment. With 19 points in spirit and the piercing vision of the Sharingan, Nathan's perception far outstripped that of ordinary shinobi. Surprise attacks simply didn't work on him. He knew this would be a battle of pure strength, where no scheme or subterfuge could match his power. Yet just as he braced himself for a direct assault, a whip of bone, shaped like a vertebra, erupted from the enemy's palm. It tore through the chest of a fellow Kaguya chunin and then whipped back, hurtling straight toward Nathan. Determined, Nathan readied himself for the blow. Nathan didn't need a second look to know who was behind the bone whip. It had to be Kaguya Kotaro. The move itself was unmistakable, one of the 6 secret corpse bone vein techniques of the Kaguya clan, the dance of the iron wire lotus vine. Renowned for its whip-like flexibility and its ability to ensnare, Kotaro had demonstrated it before. Then, he'd used the bodies of 2 fallen chunin as part of the trap. But this time was different. One of his own clansmen was being sacrificed alive to power the technique. There could be no doubt about it. Nathan felt the trapped chunin's life force ebbing away with each flicker of the whip. Horror and disbelief shone in the young ninja's eyes. He had never expected to become the unwilling anchor for Kotaro's deadly art. It was the ultimate proof of how twisted the Kaguya clan could be. Even their own people were expendable pawns in pursuit of power. For Kotaro, it seemed, there was only one goal: fight, kill, and push his technique to its absolute limit. To Nathan's frustration, the surprise attack had caught him completely off guard. He'd been locked in combat with 2 other chunin just moments before and had no chance to prepare for Karo's lethal gambit. Now, as the bone whip tightened and the air around him crackled with necrotic energy, he realized he would have to summon every ounce of skill and willpower he had left if he hoped to survive. Even after his feint, Nathan found himself ensnared. The blood-slicked bone whip whirled past him, then snapped behind and coiled tightly around his waist. Kaguya Kotaro's lips curved into a cruel grin as he watched Nathan struggle. "It's not over, yet," he snarled. "Boy, die for me." With a low roar, Kaguya channeled the power of his corpse bone veins. The whip's spine thickened and hardened, its head reshaping into a jagged spear tip aimed straight at Nathan's heart. Each tortured twist of the bone whip bit shards of pain into Nathan's side, and he knew instantly that there was no time left for his instant sword technique, instant body technique, or even a substitution jutsu. He exhaled in resignation. This seemed to be the end. Yet Nathan still held one final gambit. His eyes flicked across the clearing. The onlookers were nothing more than rank-and-file shinobi. Drawing a steady breath, he bowed his head and activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. In that instant, the air around him stilled as he unleashed the forbidden ocular jutsu of his left eye, Tianjiyu. Nathan's form blurred and vanished from sight, reappearing a split second later behind Kaguya Kotaro, just as the bone whip he commanded sliced through empty air. "What? How is this possible?" Kaguya yelled, eyes wide with shock. He stared in disbelief at Nathan, who stood perfectly unharmed. Still too stunned to react, Kaguya barely registered Nathan's next move. In the same heartbeat, Nathan unleashed his flash sword technique, phasing through the line of Chunin, blocking his path and materializing right before Kaguya. A brilliant arc of steel light traced through the air. Kaguya's instincts kicked in a moment too late. He raised an arm to block, but Nathan was already sheathing his blade. With deliberate calm, Nathan formed a series of intricate hand seals. In the next breath, he channeled his chakra into the S-rank forbidden jutsu, Wind Release, Rasen Shuriken. A piercing hum split the tension as a colossal spinning shuriken took shape in Nathan's palm, its countless razor-edged petals carved from pure wind chakra. It hovered there, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, the very air around it crackling with power. Every shinobi in the clearing felt their blood run cold as the deadly wind blade hungrily sought its target. Everyone in the clearing froze. Nathan didn't give Kaguya Kotaro a moment to react, or anyone else a chance to interfere. The instant he formed the wind style, Spiral Shuriken, he drove it straight at his opponent. A tortured scream ripped from Kotaro's throat as torrents of wind chakra wrapped around him, lifting him into the air. With a thunderous crack, the shuriken detonated into a glowing sphere, bristling with countless razor-sharp chakra needles. Each needle drove deep into Kotaro's flesh, relentlessly assaulting every cell. Within seconds, the energy ball faded away, and Kotaro collapsed, crashing to the ground in a heap. His breathing was ragged and faint. His bony protrusions had retracted back into his skin. In the blink of an eye, Nathan was standing over him. A flash of steel, a hiss of slicing air, and Kotaro's throat was cut. He slumped lifelessly to the earth. Only then did Nathan allow himself to exhale. He stared down at Kotaro's fallen body and understood, with a sinking certainty, that somehow, despite his victory, he had truly lost this time. Nathan barely escaped serious injury thanks to his trump card, the Mangekyo Sharingan. In moments like these, he reminded himself not to let his guard down or underestimate any opponent. He'd scoffed at the idea of calling in 3 Chunin for backup, convinced they'd be useless, and yet they'd taught him a harsh lesson. That realization brought him back to the true strength of a trump card. It must never be used lightly. Though he'd masked his Sharingan with subtle illusions and only flashed it for an instant, that fleeting distortion of reality couldn't go completely unnoticed. A single oddity might draw no attention, but repeated anomalies would surely spark suspicion. If people began to question the nature of those sudden changes, they might deduce his secret. To keep the Mangekyo Sharingan hidden, Nathan knew he must rely on caution and restraint. This close call had reminded him of that truth. His greatest asset was also his greatest liability if exposed. From now on, he vowed to think twice before unleashing that power, no matter how desperate the situation. Chapter 328, Delay. Nathan took a steadying breath and pushed aside the swirl of thoughts in his mind. His gaze fell on the 2 Kaguya clan Chunin who had just joined forces with Kotaro in the attack. Both warriors still stood in stunned silence over Kotaro's sudden death. Kotaro wasn't just any ninja. He was a high-ranking, battle-hardened veteran whose reputation alone inspired awe throughout the clan. Now, in the blink of an eye, he was gone, and those left behind could hardly believe it. Nathan didn't linger on their shock. Locking his focus on them, he triggered his instant sword technique. In an instant, he vanished from his spot and reappeared directly in front of the nearest Chunin, his blade already in motion. A flash of steel cut through the air. The Chunin flailed a hand to block, but it was too late. Under the influence of Nathan's illusion, Sharingan, he was frozen before the long knife sliced across his throat. His eyes went wide in horror, and then he collapsed, lifeless, as crimson blood fountained onto the ground. The second Chunin's momentary hesitation was all the time Nathan needed. The younger shinobi spun on his heel and bolted toward the clearing's edge, panic driving each pounding step. But Nathan was faster. Before the fugitive had taken more than 2 strides, the snap of steel on steel announced Nathan's arrival. A long sword drove clean through the man's torso. The Chunin choked and staggered, his knees folding beneath him as scarlet droplets dotted the grass. Agonized, he gasped for breath, but the pain was overwhelming. Nathan withdrew his blade calmly, watching as the man slumped forward in a final, hopeless collapse. Silence reclaimed the battlefield, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant cries of birds. Nathan's chest rose and fell, his cool expression betraying no triumph, only resolve. Around him lay two more casualties in the ever-turning wheel of ninja war, and beyond them, a power struggle that had claimed yet another life. Nathan sheathed his sword, eyes narrowing as he prepared for whatever came next. Nathan watched in cold satisfaction as the Hyuga Chunin stared down at the blade protruding from his chest. "Am I going to die?" the man gasped. In the next instant, a powerful suction force ripped through the wounded shinobi's back. Chakra poured out of him like water bursting through a broken dam. Deprived of his life force, the Hyuga warrior's strength ebbed away. Within seconds, he collapsed and lay still. Nathan withdrew his palm and allowed himself a satisfied nod. Not bad, all of it's back. He'd poured nearly every last drop of chakra into his wind style, Rasen Shuriken, and now, thanks to the blade's fatal breach, he'd reclaimed it all. With a soft metallic scrape, he pulled his long sword free, letting the corpse slump to the earth. He gave the blade a casual wipe on the dead man's uniform, then scanned the clearing. Every mist ninja in sight was pressed against the tree line or clustered behind boulders, faces pale, eyes wide. They'd kept their distance at first out of caution, afraid perhaps that the clash between Nathan and Hyuga Kotaro would sweep them up too. Now, having witnessed Nathan's unexpected power, they simply didn't dare come any closer. Their retreat held no sway over him. If anything, it only reminded Nathan that there were more shinobi here who needed teaching a lesson. He slipped his sword back into its sheath, shoulders squared, and stepped forward into the open. The hunt was far from over. Nathan was scanning the perimeter for his next target when suddenly a mental jolt pierced his thoughts, and a voice echoed inside his head. The sensation was unmistakable, the Yamanaka clan's mind communication technique. He grinned inwardly. With his exceptionally high spiritual attribute, already at 19 points, he was confident that, after a few more attempts, he could reverse engineer the process himself. It wasn't raw talent so much as a rock-solid foundation that made him feel this way. But Nathan wasn't about to rush it. He let the ID drift away and focused on the message at hand. "All right, listen up," came the clear, youthful voice. "Joan and Nathan, the eastern flank of the defense line is in trouble. Captains ordered you to send reinforcements right away." Nathan nodded, though only he could see the motion. He pictured the southeast coast of the Land of Waves, where Konoha's forward base had been set up to guard against any incursions by the Hidden Mist village. It was a modest installation, compact, with a short but tightly manned defensive perimeter. Yet right now, the eastern sector was under heavy attack, and every available hand was needed. He took a deep breath, then blinked out of the mental link. Turning to his squad, he spoke with crisp authority. "Move out. We're heading east, now." Within moments, Nathan led his team across the rolling dunes toward the threatened sector. The fate of the base, and perhaps much more, depended on their speed and resolve. And Nathan, ever calm, ever composed, would do everything in his power to make sure they arrived in time. Our base's defenses were split into 3 sectors, the eastern and southern lines on the flanks, and the southeastern line at the front. The southern line bore the least pressure, since it didn't face the Land of Water. The southeastern line, sandwiched between east and south, saw only moderate action. Only the eastern line, staring straight at the Land of Water, was the obvious first target of any Hidden Mist village invasion. Sure enough, that was exactly where they'd landed, and now that sector was in serious trouble. As Nathan surveyed the map, a familiar voice sounded in his mind. "Nathan, the Mist Ninjas Terumi Mei and Ao, you defeated them before, have returned. Their trajectory shows they're heading for the eastern front. Be on your guard." "Terumi Mei and Ao?" Nathan murmured, brow furrowed. Then he sent his reply. "Understood. Anything else?" "No," came the calm answer of the Yamanaka clan ninja. Nathan severed the psychic link at once. Without pausing to catch his breath, he summoned the 20 or so nearby Konoha shinobi and led them in a full sprint toward the opposite sector of the base. They were headed for the southernmost battlefield, far from the eastern front, and precisely where the hidden mist village had launched their diversionary strike. That feint had kept the mist's true intentions hidden, but it also spoke volumes about their strength. Only a formidable foe like Kaguya Kotaro would be entrusted to lead what was supposed to be a minor assault. If their diversion was this potent, what of their main thrust against the eastern defenses? The very heart of Konoha's perimeter now stood in jeopardy. As for the mist's two other heavyweights, Mei Terumi and Aoki, Nathan felt only moderate concern. Aoki had already suffered grave injuries at his hand and would require time to recover. His fighting spirit was diminished for the moment. But Mei Terumi, that was an entirely different matter. Nathan knew that Terumi Mei's melting escape and boiling escape were undeniably formidable, but that fact actually worked in his favor. Both techniques were designed for large-scale assaults, the latter especially, capable of spreading its corrosive flood across a broad area. In the chaos of this battlefield, however, neither could achieve its full effect. Even at the No. 3 sentry tower, where Mei had the open sea as a safety buffer, she'd hesitated to use them recklessly out of fear of harming her own troops. In this tighter, landlocked front, she would be even more restrained. Against a lone specialist wielding large-area ninjutsu, Nathan felt no real threat. Only if several elite shinobi banded together against him would things get dangerous. He had no intention of risking his Mangekyo Sharingan again, so he planned to keep a low profile and simply pin down a handful of the Mist's senior ninjas. The eastern defense line was wavering because Konoha lacked enough high-end combatants. If Nathan could hold off the hidden Mist's best, the current strength at the forward base would be sufficient to stabilize their defenses. Nathan sprinted onward, strategy racing through his mind. Once reinforcements from the Konoha border garrison arrived, this crisis would dissolve on its own. Even if those troops were delayed, the Mist operatives would still pull back, wary of being pursued by Konoha ninjas. Yes, Konoha's ships lacked the technological edge of the hidden Mist's sleek warships, but over a short chase, the Fire Nation vessels could close the gap. Naval combat wasn't like land battles. If your ship went down at sea, you had no choice but to fight to the last ninja. And since they were closer to the Land of Fire, Konoha's backup would inevitably reach them first. The Mist would never risk a decisive engagement here. All Nathan needed to do was hold them off long enough, display a resolute defense, and let the enemy realize this base was not an easy target. Then they'd have no choice but to retreat. Resolving this in his mind, Nathan quickened his pace. Chapter 329, Attraction. Konoha's reconnaissance network had eyes on every movement of the Mist ninjas in the field, just as the hidden Mist's operatives had ways to track Konoha's scouts. So when Nathan and his squad set out to reinforce the eastern front, the enemy detected them almost at once and struck with a swift ambush. These Mist operatives weren't elite like Kaguya Kotaro, but their leader was a full-fledged jonin, and he knew how to unleash trouble. Nathan gauged the threat, engaged decisively, and after a hard-fought skirmish, he neutralized the enemy commander. Before he could catch his breath, further waves pressed in, but Nathan drove them back one after another. With the path cleared, he sprinted toward the eastern sector of the base, the very heart of the enemy's main assault. As he drew near, the air shook with the roar of combat. Dozens of detonating talismans exploded in rapid succession, each blast sending spherical fireballs arcing into the night sky and briefly banishing the darkness with flickering light. Fortunately, no forests or hills stood close enough to catch a light. Otherwise, the entire area would already be ablaze. Even so, the relentless barrage of fire and the cries of combatants made it clear. The eastern front was in dire peril, and Nathan knew he had to act fast. Nathan stood beneath the bright full moon, its pale light illuminating the chaos of the battlefield below. The hour was late, but in truth, he would have preferred the cover of darkness. The sharper shadows of night would have given him an even greater advantage. Even so, with his Sharingan, he could ignore most environmental hindrances. He activated it now, sweeping his gaze from one clash of blades to the next. Across the field, the forces of Konoha were desperately trying to stem the tide of Mist Village shinobi. Their numbers were roughly equal, yet the balance had tipped decisively against Nathan's side. The moonlit arena, as such skirmishes were sometimes called, had rarely been so one-sided. Casualties on the Konoha side were mounting fast. If the front held any longer, they would be driven to complete collapse. No wonder the higher-ups had summoned him here in such haste, Nathan thought wryly. They were on the brink of being overrun. He didn't hesitate. Shoving aside a fallen log, Nathan sprinted toward the eastern flank, where he'd sensed the fiercest fighting. As he dashed through rubble and weaving chakras, the situation became clear. Konoha's most elite operatives, those who should have been coordinating defenses and directing reinforcements, had been forced into direct combat just to keep the line from crumbling. Mist Village's shinobi outmatched them all in both skill and numbers, and the command structure had fractured under the pressure. Nathan caught sight of a squad of Mist shinobi edge forward, preparing to encircle a battered Konoha unit. With a low growl, he charged. "Stay together," he shouted to the weary soldiers he passed. Drawing a kunai in each hand, Nathan advanced, his Sharingan rippling with crimson energy. In an instant, he anticipated each rival's move, feints, lunge attacks, and the subtle displacement of their stances. 2 kunai flashed, 2 Mist shinobi went down, and the circle broke apart. The Eastern Front regained a fraction of its former strength. Konoha's surviving special forces regrouped at Nathan's side, eyes wide with relief. For a moment, the moon seemed to shine even brighter. "This is our chance," Nathan called out, panting. "Pull back, reorganize, and push them off balance before they can recover." As reinforcements began to trickle in, Nathan allowed himself a brief nod of satisfaction, but he didn't lower his guard. The battle was far from over, and more than a few mist ninjas still pressed in every direction. With the moon overhead and his Sharingan ablaze, Nathan steeled himself for the next wave. If they could hold this line, Konoha might yet turn the tide. Without their strongest fighters, the remaining Konoha shinobi were in complete disarray, no match for the Kiriga, core jonin, whose average combat prowess was far greater. Nathan's mission was simple: distract enough mist ninjas to free the Konoha special jonin and let them fall back into position, restoring balance to the battlefield. His first target was a Kirigakure jonin already tangled up with 2 Konoha specialists. In a blur of green light, Nathan unleashed his instant sword technique, appearing at the enemy's flank. He raised his long blade just in time to deflect a thrown kunai with a crisp ding. "Nathan jonin," the 2 Konoha shinobi exclaimed, relief flooding their voices. Without even glancing back, Nathan said, "I've got this. You 2, move out." "Understood." They exchanged a confident nod and slipped away, vanishing into the chaos of battle. The Mist jonin in front of Nathan hesitated for only a moment before closing in, clearly unwilling to let their comrade be rescued so easily. Yet Nathan stood his ground, blade at the ready, as the fight for Konoha's equilibrium began in earnest. He studied Nathan's boyish face and asked, "Are you the Ghost Blade, Nathan?" Although phrased as a question, his tone left no doubt. Nathan said nothing. Confirming his identity would defeat the point. He wasn't merely stalling this one shinobi, but drawing out every mist-hidden operative in the area. To bait them, he had to demonstrate real power. A faint smile curved his lips, and in an instant, his Sharingan flashed, genjutsu rippling from his gaze. Aware of Nathan's reputation for illusion, the mist ninja squeezed his eyes shut and fell back. But Nathan pressed the advantage, sweeping his long sword in a relentless series of strikes. Clang, clang, clash, clash. Each blow aimed to overpower and unnerve. Seasoned in combat, the ninja anticipated every swing, intercepting the blade with precise parries and deft footwork. His senses, honed through countless battles, let him counter Nathan's flurry, but this was only the opening gambit. Ding! Nathan blocked the incoming kunai, then smoothly sheathed his blade. In the same motion, he formed a hand seal with his left hand, thrust his arm forward, and expelled a colossal sphere of flame, the fire style, great fireball technique. The sudden shift in tactics caught the mist-hidden ninja off guard. He tumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the blaze. Before Nathan could pause, he opened his mouth once more and unleashed a rapid barrage of smaller fireballs, each bursting forth like fiery impatience seeds. The ninja's body shuddered under the searing heat, and he leapt aside, hearts pounding, to evade the relentless onslaught. A sharp whistle split the air. "What?" the ninja gasped, whirling to face his attacker. Through the dissipating smoke, he spotted them, several crimson-hot shuriken, spinning toward him with deadly precision. Nathan had concealed the blades within his Phoenix Fire technique, transforming a simple fireball into a concealed barrage. Swish! A metallic rasp, followed by the scent of burning flesh. The mist-hidden ninja recoiled in pain, clutching at his left arm as blackened blood oozed between his fingers. He glared at Nathan, wounded but far from defeated, as the flames crackled around them. Nathan realized too late that he'd misjudged his opponent. He twisted to dodge, but the mist-hidden ninja had already predicted his move, his shuriken slashing across Nathan's forearm before he could fully get out of the way. "Damn, kid," the ninja spat, his eyes flickering with annoyance and a hint of fear. But Nathan saw the silver lining. That first strike had given him exactly the information he needed about his adversary's speed and range. Seizing the moment, he counterattacked without hesitation. Chakra flared through his blade as he unleashed the instant sword technique, closing the gap in the blink of an eye. Steel sang through the air as he followed with a rapid, practiced sword combo, thrust after thrust that drove the mist ninja backward. Cornered and off balance, the enemy desperately tried to defend himself, but Nathan had already begun weaving elemental ninjutsu. A sud, then gust of wind knocked the ninja sideways, a flash of flame scorched the ground at his feet, and a swirling veil of water blurred his vision. Each technique compounded the pressure, chipping away at the ninja's composure. Reeling from the onslaught, the mist-hidden ninja stumbled, his defenses crumbling. Nathan's blade hovered at the ready, poised to strike again at the first opening. Nathan pressed his advantage, raining blows down on the mist shinobi until his opponent was nothing more than a wounded wreck. Cuts from the long sword crisscrossed his armor, kunai and shuriken punctured his limbs, and scorch marks from ninjutsu spells dotted his flank. Despite the pain, the mist ninja struggled to strike back, but every swing, every projectile, every burst of chakra Nathan unleashed was met with a flawless dodge or a perfectly timed block. The shinobi's breath came in ragged gasps, and his guard began to falter. Sensing the moment was ripe, Nathan shifted seamlessly between his own signature techniques, sword skill, instant sword art, and illusion blade style. Each attack struck faster and more unpredictably than the last, forcing the enemy ever closer to defeat. Just as Nathan drew back for the final, killing stroke, a flurry of shuriken whistled in from the side. He froze for a heartbeat, eyes tracking the deadly projectiles. Then, with the grace of a master swordsman, he spun aside and rolled to safety, letting the spinning steel stars clatter harmlessly to the ground. Nathan rose, blade at the ready, unwavering and unscathed, already anticipating his opponent's next move. Chapter 330, 5 against 1 Swish. In the blink of an eye, a dark blue figure materialized between Nathan and the mist shinobi he'd nearly finished off. The newcomer wore a navy cloak, one eye visible beneath his hood, and 2 ceiling tags dangling from his earlobes. Ching, the same opponent Nathan had fought before. Yet Ching hadn't launched the shurikens. Nathan's gaze flicked to the right and locked on to Mei Terumi as she withdrew her hands. She'd been the one to strike. Before Nathan could react, he spotted a third interloper to his left. Tall and slender, with spiky needle-like blonde hair, a black and white Anbu mask covering his face, and dozens of bandages wound around his neck, he bore a chilling resemblance to Kurishai Kushimaru, one of the legendary 7 swordsmen of the mist. In his right hand gleamed a long, slender needle, its tip tethered to a fine steel wire that caught the torchlight. Surrounded by these 3 high-level mist operatives, Nathan tensed, every muscle primed for the next wave of attacks. The odds were stacked against him, and there was no mistaking their intent. They'd come to stop him at all costs. Nathan blinked as he caught sight of the blade in Kushimaru's left hand. Its shape, its shimmer. There was no mistaking it. One of the 7 ninja swordsmen's legendary weapons, the longsword known as Sewing Needle. That alone confirmed his opponent's identity. A member of the 7 ninja swordsmen, a dual-blood limiter, a white-eyed assassin? Heh, you really do choose your targets carefully, Nathan murmured inwardly, though his face betrayed nothing. Kushimaru wasted no time. He thrust the sword forward in a casual flourish and asked, "You're the kid who killed Biwa Juzo and Kuroki Raiga, aren't you?" He sized Nathan up with a sneer. "Up close, you don't seem so special." Nathan forced down any reaction. With his adversary identified, there was no point in arguing. He shifted his stance, fingers flying through the seals of chakra control. Fire style, great fireball technique. He was ready to unleash it in the same instant. But then something tugged at his senses. A faint ripple of chakra rose from beneath his feet, too subtle to be his own energy. A chill ran down his spine as Nathan realized he was no longer alone. Still alive? Someone else? Nathan's hand froze mid-seal. He slammed both feet into the earth and vaulted skyward just as a short sword erupted from the ground, grazing his jacket. From a few paces away, Kurishan Kushimaru's lips curled in mild disappointment, but only for a moment. He tightened his grip on the steel-reinforced wire needle in his hand, his signature long sword, sewing needle, then launched it with a flurry of effort. The needle sliced through the air with a sharp whistle. Nathan's Sharingan flared to life, tracking its path. With a single, decisive swing of his kunai, he shattered the projectile before it could reach him. Unfazed, Kushimaru steadied the other end of the wire with his left hand, pulling it taut. In one seamless motion, he spun his wrist and sent the needle soaring again, this time flipping mid-flight, its tip aimed straight for Nathan's back. Nathan's heightened reflexes kicked in. He twisted in mid-air, narrowly avoiding the blade's sting. Emotion flickered across Kushimaru's face. Amusement, perhaps, but Nathan was already preparing his next move. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he tightened his core and whipped his torso nearly 90 degrees in mid-air, just barely ducking beneath the blade. A hiss of displaced air marked the sword's passing, and then Nathan landed lightly on his feet, a faint grin on his lips. "Heh!" Kurishan Kushimaru murmured, amusement in his voice. "Ghost Sword Nathan, you've got real talent." Before Nathan could question the praise, the earth at his attacker's feet burst open. A figure in full Kirigakure Anbu garb, mask and all, sprang into view, a second assassination specialist from the hidden mist. Nathan realized he had been outmaneuvered. This mission had drawn not only Mei Terumi and Kurishan Kushimaru, but also an elite Anbu operative. Add to that the Jonin who nearly finished him off earlier, and the hidden mist now had 5 shinobi bearing down on him. Nathan took a steadying breath. 5 against 1 might be overwhelming, but he wasn't about to crumble. He squared his shoulders and locked eyes with the newly emerged Anbu. The blade at his side pulsed with chilled power, and a quiet confidence settled over him. No matter how many knives they threw his way, Nathan would stand his ground. Nathan steadied his breath. If he could hold off these 5 shinobi, his mission would be complete. It wasn't that the hidden mist had somehow eliminated 5 of Konoha's Jonin all by themselves. Konoha had dispatched an almost equal force in response. With both sides reinforcing simultaneously, failure for Nathan would be inevitable. Could he turn the tide with his Mangekyo Sharingan? He'd certainly considered it. But after witnessing the ferocity of Kushimaru Kuriyashima and the hidden mist Anbu's ambush, he dismissed the idea. At this stage, much of the mist's Anbu was secretly under Madara Uchiha's control, setting a trap for Uchiha Obito. Trust was a liability. If even one of these opponents, especially the 2 closest to him, was Madara's pawn, unleashing his Mangekyo would instantly tip him off. The others might not notice, but Madara, an experienced Mangekyo user himself, surely would. So no Mangekyo. Nathan would rely on sheer will, strategy, and endurance, holding the line against their onslaught until reinforcements arrived. Nathan's thoughts raced. He didn't want any part of meddling with a dying man, especially not when Black Zetsu, the ever-loyal son, clung so closely to Uchiha Madara. He certainly didn't need to catch their attention now. In 2 years, his Mangekyo Sharingan would mature into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, eliminating the threat of blindness altogether. Only then could he spar with Madara without reservation. Shaking himself back to the present, Nathan steeled his resolve. The 5 shinobi from Kirigakure were already closing in. No sooner had his feet touched the ground than Mei Terumi lunged forward, seals formed in an instant. A roiling water dragon erupted at her command, roaring as it barreled toward him. The others moved just as swiftly. Kunai flew through the air, shadowy traps snapped shut, and ninjutsu attacks joined the fray. In a flash, Nathan found himself surrounded, every foe pressing the assault. He cracked his neck, narrowed his eyes, and let the battle begin. Their teamwork was anything but seamless, especially with Kurishan Kushimaru in the mix. Cold-blooded and ruthless, he treated human life as inconsequential. That very callousness was Nathan's chance. Drawing on the acute perception of his Sharingan, he deliberately sprung Kushimaru's own traps, parrying and striking back in ways that left the others on edge. They sensed something was off, but had no proof. All they could do was tread more warily. As minutes ticked by, the clash escalated until the first casualty fell. It was the missed Shinobi, whom Nathan had already gravely wounded. Yet the fatal blow wasn't his. It came courtesy of one of Kushimaru's long sword sewing needle traps, its poisoned blades finishing off the fighter. Nathan's illusions had guided the victim straight into the snare, but the kill belonged to Kushimaru's merciless ingenuity. Chapter 331, Sharpening the Blade Screech. Kushimaru Kuretari hammered his long needle into the ground, then yanked on its attached steel wire with a grunt. Instantly, dozens of taut strands leapt into the air, whistling like vipers. Phew! Phew! The wires shot toward Nathan's neck, poised to pierce and coil. But just as they were about to strike, a swirl of chakra smoke erupted in his place, his substitution jutsu. When the haze cleared, Nathan was gone, and in his stead lay a bundle of wooden stakes. Not a drop of blood marred the wires. On the other side of the clearing, a Kirigakure Jonin who'd been dueling Nathan smirked triumphantly, but his celebration was short-lived. One of those same wires had nicked his chest with a faint shk, slicing clean through heart and lung. A geyser of dark crimson burst from the wound, splashing the earth and painting the training ground red. The Jonin's eyes dulled, and he collapsed in a heap. Terumi Mei and Ching stared down at his corpse, their faces twisted in disgust. Behind them, Kushimaru Kuretari and a second Kirigakure Anbu paused only a heartbeat. Then, recovering instantly, refocused their assault on Nathan and charged forward once more. Mei Terumi and Ao exchanged a weary sigh and pressed on with their attack, but the sting of their earlier failures had made them gun-shy. Even when clear openings appeared, they hesitated, unwilling to gamble everything on a single strike. That caution gave Nathan the breathing room he needed and eased much of the pressure on him. And so the battle dragged on in this awkward stalemate. 30 minutes later, Nathan's timely arrival finally began to show its worth. By keeping Mei Terumi and her cohorts occupied, he liberated the Konoha Jonin who'd been pinned down elsewhere. With those veterans back in action, the entire Eastern Front tipped back in favor of the Leaf, so much so that victory for Kirigakure suddenly looked in serious jeopardy. Kirigakure's commanders refused to accept defeat. 10 minutes after the tide turned, a fresh contingent of Jonin and Special Jonin, redeployed from the southern and southeastern sectors, rushed in to reinforce the siege on Nathan. They'd clearly identified him as the linchpin of Konoha's resurgence and were determined to crush him before the Leaf forces could press their advantage. Commander Kirigakure knew that as long as Nathan remained in the field, Konoha's forward base would never fall. Determined to take him out, Kirigakure poured more troops into the assault. At the same time, Kuriraki Kushimaru, apparently forewarned, tightened his guard and began coordinating his attacks more carefully with the rest of their forces. The sudden surge in well-timed strikes put Nathan under intense pressure. Even with his Sharingan granting him split-second foresight, he still absorbed several wounds in quick succession. Just as fatigue threatened to slow him, a voice crackled in his comlink, the Mountain Clan Shinobi. "Nathan, what's your status? Do you need backup?" He glanced at the anxious faces of his companions watching from cover, then surveyed the fresh cuts and bruises staining his armor. Spitting a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth, he shook his head. "Not yet. I've got this." It wasn't bravado. Though dozens of enemies circled him, they attacked in disjointed waves, enough to harass him relentlessly, but not to land a killing blow. They could crank up the frequency of their strikes, but without unified coordination, they couldn't break his defense. Nathan combined the penetrating insight of his Sharingan with the tremendous physical power granted by 16 points in physique and the razor-sharp awareness from 19 points in spirit. The crush of pressure remained well within his capacity. Seizing the moment, he resolved to use this force to finally master the Kusanagi sword in his hand. Although he'd already tested himself in battle with the long blade, his skill remained only average. He had trained primarily with short swords until now. In the ninja world, all blades fell under the same category, but wielding a shorter weapon versus a lengthy sword required distinctly different techniques. He needed a grueling trial to break old habits and truly dominate the heavier weapon. Only by doing so could he unlock the full potential of his level 7 perfect state swordsmanship. Fierce combat of this caliber would also accelerate the growth of his phantom sword and instant sword techniques, saving him time and energy in the long run. After carefully weighing the risks and rewards, Nathan chose to face this challenge alone. Nathan's words hung in the air, and for a moment the Mountain Clan ninja opposite him said nothing. Then he bowed his head in acknowledgement. "Understood. I'll keep watch over you, and if you need support, I'll back you up." "Good." Nathan nodded, dispelling the ninja's probing mental energy with a subtle gesture. Instantly, he slipped into a series of swift hand seals and activated the Palm Immortal technique. He focused, molding several orbs of Yang escape chakra and pouring them into his battered flesh. Since his promotion to level 8, the Palm Immortal technique had grown exponentially more powerful. As the warm chakra seeped through his wounds, Nathan felt sinew and skin knitting together at a breathtaking pace. If this continued, he'd be fully healed in mere minutes and ready to reclaim the fight. But just as relief began to wash over him, the silence shattered. From a concealed nook along the rocky wall, a flurry of shuriken whipped toward him, and another ninja lunged from the shadows. With no time for more seals, Nathan twisted aside, gritting his teeth as two blades rasped across his cheek. The sting of fresh scars reminded him that in this world there was no room for complacency. Nathan tasted copper on his tongue as blood splattered to the floor with a soft tick, tick, tick. A fierce heat flared across his cheek, but he forced himself to think clearly. Now was not the time to chase perfect recovery. If he tried to seal every wound completely, new cuts would open almost as soon as he finished. Yet he dared not ignore his injuries entirely. Left unattended, even a minor rupture could fester into something lethal. So Nathan summoned just enough of the Palm Immortal technique to knit flesh and staunch bleeding. It wasn't full restoration, but it was enough to keep him fighting. That swift, partial healing had been his salvation. Though outnumbered in this covert free-for-all skirmish, Nathan had refused to yield. He'd bled and healed in equal measure, trading blows until he crippled two of the mist-hidden ninjas. Both staggered back, battered and bleeding. Minutes dripped by like slow molasses. The remaining assailants circled tighter, their gaze shifting from confidence to caution. Something about Nathan's battered, blood-spattered form seemed wrong, ominous even. They sensed the fight was far from over. Nathan's strength had been rising with every passing moment, his swordsmanship growing deadlier by the second. At the outset, his opponents had only acknowledged that his technique was impressive. They'd never understood why his blade earned the name Ghost Sword. Now, as the battle dragged on, the epithet made terrifying sense. Nathan slipped in and out of their line of sight like a specter, his kusanagi sword striking with the sudden, venomous precision of a poisoned serpent. Only by clustering together and watching each other's backs could they hope to withstand his onslaught. Otherwise, there'd have been bodies littering the ground. Even so, several of them bore deep cuts, and though none were fatal, their wounds sapped their strength and morale. Each injury weakened the group a little more, lightening the burden on Nathan until the pressure he felt now was a fraction of what it had been at the start. Chapter 332, Retreat. By the second half of the night, the moon had slipped westward across the sky. Yet despite hours of effort, the Mist's elite shinobi had still failed to breach any of the three defensive lines protecting Konoha's positions. On a Kirigakure warship moored just off the coast, tensions ran high. Jonin Hayato slammed a stack of freshly arrived battle reports onto a lacquered table. "Useless," he growled under his breath, ripping open another dispatch. Each report was worse than the last. The Eastern Front outpost they'd taken at dawn had already fallen back into Konoha's hands, and those defenders were pushing forward again. The same story spread from the south and southeast battlefields. Wave after wave of Leaf Shinobi were reclaiming lost ground. Hayato's knuckles whitened as he read the stark figures. Kirigakure was on the back foot along the entire third line of defenses. The commander, Mizukage Chianyulyu, paced nearby, her face a mask of frustration. With every new report, her patience thinned. "How are we still being cut down like this?" she demanded in a low, dangerous tone. "We hold these lines at all costs. If we can't, then it's time to fall back and regroup." As the Mizukage delivered her orders, the warship's crew braced for a hasty retreat, aware that tonight's setbacks might force them into an even more desperate fight before the dawn. As for the one responsible for all this chaos, Uchiha Nathan, the so-called Ghost Sword, Chianyulyu loathed him with a passion. Yet it was downright humiliating that a mere 12 or 13-year-old prodigy could shrug off defeat at Kirigakure's doorstep. If Nathan hadn't already built his reputation by slaying Juzang Loquat and the notorious Black Hoe, Leia, Chianyulyu might have written him off as an overconfident child. Not long ago, Kotaro Kaguya perished right under Chianyulyu's watch. He'd even suspected Mei Terumi and the others of foul play, until he replayed the battle in his mind and realized their honor was intact. Still, the outcome defied all reason. 7 or 8 of Kirigakure's finest jonin, among them double-blooded shinobi like Mei Terumi and the elite swordmaster Kushimaru Kurihara, joined forces, and yet none could bring Nathan down. Nathan fought with a ferocity that made him seem frail yet unbreakable. Time and again he absorbed their deadliest strikes, survived impossible blows, and counterattacked hard enough to leave several jonin bleeding. Watching this display of resilience, Chianyulyu shook his head in bafflement. There was no logical way to explain it, so he simply stopped trying. There's an old saying, if you don't have the strength to strike outright, you can't afford to lurk in the shadows. Reluctantly, Chianyulyu tried just that, thinning his cordon down to a lone pair of jonin whose only task was to keep an eye on Nathan. But against his power, those jonin might as well have been delivering sandwiches. Nathan's prowess far outstripped a standard jonin's. Even when Chianyulyu deployed Terumi Mei and several of his heaviest hitters, Nathan simply sidestepped their every trap, slipping away at the last second to weave himself into other scattered squads. In one brutal exchange, set up by a coalition of Konoha's finest, Nathan cleaved through a jonin so swiftly and cleanly that it shattered Chianyulyu's composure. With his containment gambit in ruins, Chianyulyu had no choice but to throw every available soldier into a full siege. Although it soon became clear that Nathan wasn't seeking a decisive victory, but merely stalling for time, Chianyulyu couldn't risk recalling a single man. Nathan's reputation for annihilating lone targets was too deadly a threat. By single-handedly pinning down nearly half of Kirigakure's jonin on the Eastern Front, Nathan bought Konoha's main forces the precious moments they needed. It was that brand of high-end combat power, swift, surgical, and utterly unpredictable, that tipped the scales and paved the way for Konoha's successful counterattack. Nathan forced down his frustration and clear at his throat, addressing the darkened corner of the command tent. How long until the Hidden Leaf reinforcements arrive? A cloaked Ambu operative stepped forward from the shadows. His mask betrayed nothing, but his voice was steady. The Flying Fish Squad just radioed in. The Leaf forces have landed at Red Coral Reef. At best, they'll be here in 3 hours. 3 hours, Nathan repeated, barely more than a whisper. He trailed off, drumming his index finger against the wooden table. Tick, tick, tick. Each beat stretched the silence thinner. Nearly 10 minutes slipped by before Nathan abruptly sat up. He snatched the battle report off the table and scanned it one last time, brow furrowed. At length, he exhaled with a soft, weary sigh. "All right," he said, voice low. "Issue the order to pull back." The words felt like a blow. Nathan sank back against his chair, utterly spent. As a jonin of modest skill and no powerful clan backing him, his only real strength lay in his tactical mind, and now, even that had led to defeat. He closed his eyes, dreading how hard it would be to rise again after this. If this battle goes well, he still might have a chance to secure a seat at the village's center of power. But right now, don't even entertain the idea. The village has been silent for so long precisely to strike when fully prepared. And yet we've suffered heavy losses in both troops and commanders, and not a single one of our strategic goals has been achieved. Originally, the plan was to seize Konoha's forward base in the Land of Waves, use it as a springboard to invade the Fire Country's mainland, and eventually push our front lines all the way to the heart of their territory. Instead, we haven't even secured that forward base, much less laid the groundwork for any follow-up operations. As for claiming credit, forget it. Responsibility has already been assigned, and it isn't ours to shoulder. There's simply no point in pressing on. Sure, we could keep fighting, but with our odds of success hovering at just 11%, continuing would be nothing short of a suicide mission. In the end, Qian Yuliu couldn't bring himself to sacrifice his men needlessly. He reluctantly gave the order to fall back, not only because their losses were mounting, but because even a victory today would be hollow once Konoha's reinforcements arrived. Better to live to fight another day and preserve the village's strength. Without a word of protest, the Kirigakure Anbu at his side bowed and withdrew. In perfect formation, the ninja on all three fronts began their orderly retreat. Across the field, the Konoha forces noted their movement. The Uchiha Jonin in command considered pursuit, but the battered state of his own troops made him hesitate. They had repelled the ambush, true, but at great cost. Many shinobi lay wounded, and the survivors were drained of chakra and stamina. Any rash advance now might only let the Kirigakure slip away and leave Konoha's defenders even more vulnerable. So he held his line and watched the enemy vanish into the mist, knowing that this battle was lost, but the war was far from over. Having accomplished more than enough for their mission, the Uchiha Jonin decided it was best to hold their ground rather than press their advantage. Nathan felt the same. Watching the Kirigakure Jonin break off their siege, he tightened his grip on the hilt of his long sword, then with a sharp flick, shook the blood from the blade and slid it neatly back into its sheath. He'd performed exceptionally in this skirmish. There was no point in chasing down a handful of mist ninjas and risking unnecessary attention. Nathan reminded himself why he'd been sent to this battlefield in the first place. He'd already provoked one root cell by his actions. Drawing the notice of a second would be disastrous. Though the odds against detection were slim to begin with, he wanted to minimize them as much as possible. Satisfied that the last of the mist forces had vanished beyond the tree line, he began the walk back to base. Before he could even loosen hine, his armor, or draw a breath, a chunin stepped out from behind a supply tent. "Sir Uchiha," the young shinobi called, bowing low. "Intelligence just arrived from headquarters. You're to report back immediately." Nathan's jaw clenched. No rest yet. Not until this assignment was truly done. Nathan's eyes snapped open before the young chunin could get a word out. He fixed him with a sharp frown. "What is it?" The Konoha chunin swallowed hard, then chose his words carefully. "Jonin Nathan, the medical corps is dangerously short on hands right now. I wanted to ask your opinion." Nathan fell silent, pondering the implication of the request. Chapter 333, Treatment. "Are you treating me like a pack horse?" Nathan seethed inwardly, but he said nothing. He couldn't refuse, not after just breaking through to level 8 in the Palm Immortal technique. That advancement demanded endless practice, and his reputation wouldn't let him show any hesitation. Besides, he still had plenty of chakra to spare. He'd learned long ago that fame carries its own burdens. Sometimes you swallow your pride for the sake of long-term gains. Luckily, this assignment wasn't entirely pointless. There was a sliver of benefit for him, or he never would have agreed to part with so much chakra. Still, he couldn't afford to seem too eager. If future complications arose, he'd be the one scrambling to fix them. He kept silent until the Konoha chunin before him grew visibly uneasy. Then Nathan rose from his seat, forcing a reluctant sigh. "All right," he conceded. "You want me to treat the wounded, right? Show me where they are." The chunin blinked, clearly taken aback. Yes," he stammered, uncertain whether to lead or question this sudden compliance. Nathan merely nodded and fell into step behind him. Whatever lay ahead, he'd face it, and refine his technique on his own terms. Nathan's promise seemed to snap the Konoha chunin out of his surprise. He quickly recovered, offering a brisk nod and sweeping his arm toward a corridor. "This way," Jonin Nathan. They passed through winding hallways until they arrived at a large treatment chamber. 24 or so injured shinobi lay on stretchers, their wounds being attended by several busy medical nin. Nathan scanned the room, then raised an eyebrow. "That's all of them?" The chunin shook his head. "Hardly. These are just the first group brought in. The rest are still out on the outer defense line. Nathan murmured in understanding. Of course, the base commander wouldn't risk shuttling everyone back at once, especially if Kiri forces launched a counterstrike. A rotation system made perfect sense. Only the gravest casualties were evacuated here, while the others held the perimeter. Otherwise, with how he'd fought in the last skirmish, Nathan would have been whisked away for rest. Instead, he found himself among the critically wounded. He inhaled slowly, steeling himself for whatever came next. Nathan hurried over to the fallen Konoha shinobi and knelt beside him. Rolling up his sleeves, he began a rapid assessment of the man's injuries. The ninja lay unconscious, several deep lacerations marking his skin, some clearly from ordinary shuriken and kunai, others more severe, as if detonating talismans or a fire-style escape jutsu had ripped through flesh and muscle. All of these wounds, thankfully, fell within the scope of Nathan's specialty, the palm immortal technique. Wasting no time, he retrieved water and a clean cloth, gently dabbing away blood and debris to expose each wound. Once satisfied the area was clean, he formed the requisite hand seal. A verdant glow pulsed into being around his right palm, bright and alive. Nathan inhaled sharply, channeling his yang-infused chakra into the technique. As the green light flared, he pressed his palm against the largest wound on the shinobi's torso. Instantly, he felt the subtle tug of living cells responding, division accelerating, damaged tissue knitting together, vital proteins springing into being. Time seemed to slow as Nathan guided the flow of healing chakra, watching bruises fade and torn flesh seal. His heart pounded with concentration, every second critical. 15 minutes later, he withdrew his hand. The last gash had closed neatly, the ninja's breathing grown steadier. Color returned to his cheeks, though his eyes remained shut. He was still unconscious, weakened by blood loss. Nathan sat back on his heels and allowed himself a moment's relief. The worst was over. All external damage had been mended. Now they only needed to stabilize the shinobi's vitals and restore his strength. He drew a deep breath and prepared to carry the man to safety, hopeful that life would soon return to the dormant eyelids. Nathan needed a breather. He waved to the two Chunin assistants standing by and called out, "Take him back to his quarters and be careful on the way." "Got it. We've got you," one of them replied. In moments, they'd eased the injured man onto a stretcher and carried him off. As they disappeared down the corridor, Nathan shook his head, allowed himself a single, steadying breath, and turned to the next patient. The routine was nothing new. Examine the wound, diagnose the injury, apply the treatment. Nathan moved from one person to the next with mechanical precision, his hands swift and sure. Within 2 hours, he had treated 10 patients, nearly half of the seriously wounded in the main hall. It was a pace 4 or 5 times faster than the average medical ninja. What made Nathan so fast was his jutsu. His perfect state healing technique knit torn flesh together with barely a whisper of chakra. His level 5 chakra scalpel cut with surgical accuracy, leaving no room for error. And his level 8 palm magic accelerated recovery, sealing wounds so thoroughly that patients often woke hours later with nothing but aching limbs to remind them of their ordeal. By the time he wiped the last bead of sweat from his brow, Nathan had already arranged for the final patient to be carried away and was preparing to stand. He gave his back a satisfied stretch. No matter how many came through the doors, no matter how dire their condition, he would be ready. His efficiency came from the seamless fusion of every medical skill at his command. True, the injuries he treated were often severe, but they were straightforward, clean fractures, severed ligaments, punctured organs. If bone fragments had pierced the nervous system, even his famed palm immortal technique would have been powerless. Rare toxins or exotic wounds could still render him helpless, just as now. Nathan pressed his hands against the fallen shinobi's chest, closing his eyes to trace the flow of blood and chakra to detect any lingering blockages. After a moment, he drew back, brows furrowed. At his side, another Konoha ninja, clearly alarmed, rushed over. "Jonin Nathan, is something wrong?" Nathan shook his head. "It's worse than I thought. He's been poisoned, the toxin's already spreading through his system. I'd need a specialized medical ninjutsu to purge it, and we don't have the luxury of time." The younger ninja's face went pale. "Then what do we do?" Nathan met his gaze steadily. Our only option is to evacuate him to the frontline medical corps. Move, now. Hearing Nathan's call, the medical ninja who'd just finished treating the patient nearby looked up, but Nathan waved again and added, "Jonin Chiba, could you come over here?" At 40 years old, Chiba was the lead medic of Konoha's forward operating base, a special jonin famed for his mastery of medical ninjutsu, and above all, his ability to purge toxins from a ninja's body. He caught Nathan's eye, offered a slight, easygoing smile, and strolled over. "Hey, Nathan," Chiba said, every bit as courteous as he always was toward the young medic in training. "What's up?" Nathan pointed at the Konoha shinobi lying unconscious on the ground. "There's something off about his condition. I've run some standard chakra scans, but I think there may be a toxin or an abnormal energy residue we're missing." He paused, meeting Chiba's steady gaze. "I need your expertise to figure out exactly what we're dealing with." With that, Nathan began to outline the strange internal readings he'd detected, as Jonin Chiba listened intently. After Nathan finished explaining, Qianye Qingping's eyes lit up with understanding. "So you want me to use the subtle troubles extraction technique to purge the poison from his body?" Qianye asked. Nathan nodded. "Yes. The venom has burrowed deep into his core. Right now, you're the only one who can save him." Earlier, Nathan had described this ability, a B-rank medical ninjutsu known as the subtle troubles extraction technique. It can sense disturbances in a patient's chak, ra, pinpoint harmful toxins and pathogens, then remove them with pinpoint accuracy. Across the entire medical ninja corps, only Chiba Qinghe had ever mastered it, meaning Qianye Qingping is the sole medic capable of rescuing this wounded Konoha shinobi. Qianye stroked his chin and let out a low chuckle. "All right, let me have a look." He knelt beside the unconscious ninja and laid his hands lightly on the man's chest. Closing his eyes, Qianye tuned in to the flow of chakra beneath the skin, preparing to detect and extract the poisonous residue obstructing its natural course. After a moment, he withdrew his hand, gave a nod, and said, "That should work." Before Nathan could reply, the nearby Konoha shinobi nearly jumped out of his skin with excitement. Nathan shot him a quick look, raised a finger to his lips, and whispered, "Quiet! Now, what do you need me to do?" Chapter 3 and 34 exchange. "Don't tell me it's really that bad." Nathan's voice trembled as he stared at Qianye Qingping. Qianye Qingping cut him off without ceremony. "His injury is critical and full of toxin. I can't afford even a moment's distraction while I extract it. I need you to keep him stable." Nathan nodded, his jaw set. "Understood. Good." Qingping barely glanced at him before barking an order to an attendant. In moments, a basin of water was placed at his side. Satisfied, he closed his eyes and centered himself, drawing in slow, deep breaths. When he opened them again, his face was all business. "Whenever you're ready." Nathan squared his shoulders and met his gaze. "I'm ready." Qingping's hands blurred into a series of precise seals. Softly he chanted the first part of his ninjutsu, minor malady exorcism, his senses already hunting down the pockets of toxin hidden within their Konoha comrade's body. The air around him quivered, as a faint chakra trail became visible beneath his fingertips. After a beat, he shifted into the next sequence. His right hand glowed as chakra condensed into a razor-sharp edge. With one fluid motion, Qingping drew it across the wounded ninja's chest. An acrid, fishy stench burst free from the cut, mingling with the grim tension in the room. Qingping's brow tightened as he braced for what came next. Nathan dipped a clean cloth into the waiting basin of water and knelt beside the patient. "I've got him," he said quietly. "Let's finish this." Blood welled around the incision as dark purple bruises bloomed in swollen patterns, silent proof that toxins had pooled beneath the skin. The Konoha shinobi lay on the ground, groaning through a haze of unconsciousness. His face twitched with pain, each breath growing shallower, as if a candle flame threatened to gutter out. "Nathan!" Qianye Qingping's voice rang out. "Urgent!" "On it!" Nathan snapped back. In one fluid motion, he brought his hands together, forming the seals with lightning speed. He unleashed the A-rank medical ninjutsu known as Palm Senjutsu. A roaring pulse of yang chakra surged into the wounded shinobi, weaving through muscle and vein, purging poison and knitting torn flesh. The results were immediate. The man's breathing found depth and rhythm, his life signs stabilizing like a flame steadied behind a glass shield. Even Qianye Qingping, no stranger to advanced healing techniques, couldn't help but flick a sharp, impressed glance at Nathan. To the untrained eye, it was simply another medical jutsu, but to a true master, the subtleties of that famed immortal palm spoke volumes. As far as this palm technique is concerned, few in the entire Hidden Leaf village could rival it, perhaps only the legendary Tsunade herself. Qianye Qingping reflected silently. He'd already suspected that Nathan's speed in treating the wounded was unusually fast, but now he understood why. With mastery of a medical ninjutsu like this, most battlefield injuries could be healed in moments. No wonder the young shinobi was confident enough to guarantee his patient's stability. He truly possessed remarkable skill. Even as these thoughts crossed his mind, Qingping's hands never stopped moving. He made a precise incision across the fallen ninja's chest, then reshaped his hand seals and called upon another technique, the minor ailment extraction. Instantly, gossamer threads of chakra streamed from his palms into the wounded shinobi, seeking out every trace of toxin. The chakra wove itself into a fine, silken net, gently ensnaring the poison and drawing it out of the body. When the final remnants of toxin pooled in the basin below, Qingping lifted his right hand and prepared the next step of the treatment. Plop! The little orb of liquid hit the basin, sending ripples across the surface as the water tinted pale purple. Chiba Qingping exhaled in relief. He'd been about 70 to 80% confident before making the first draw, but seeing that initial drop of venom finally put his mind at ease. Now, having proven the method worked, all he needed to do was repeat it with care. It was delicate, painstaking work, but with Nathan assisting, he could focus entirely on the extraction and finish more quickly. Steadying himself, Chiba Qingping prepared for the second draw. Minute by minute, the two men fell into a flawless rhythm. One held the wound perfectly still, the other guided the needle to draw out the toxin. Each translucent purple drop fell into the waiting basin, and the tense faces of the Konoha ninja standing by softened with every passing moment. At last, half an hour later, the final vial filled. Chiba Qingping released a long-held breath and allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The dangerous venom was fully contained. Nathan's eyes flickered with determination. He pressed his palm against the gravely wounded shinobi from Konoha and quietly chanted the incantation for the palm immortal technique. A surge of warm chakra radiated outward, knitting flesh and sealing blood vessels in an instant. Though this rapid treatment could only stabilize the injuries, true recovery would still require time and rest. It was nothing short of miraculous by conventional ninja standards. In a world governed by strict physical laws, such swift, near-supernatural healing would be the stuff of legends. Yet here, in the realm of extraordinary powers, the impossible had just become reality. Nathan drew back his hand and turned to the waiting Konoha ninja at his side. He's out of danger now. Let's get him to proper medical care immediately. Tears of relief brimmed in the young shinobi's eyes as he dropped to his knees, bowing repeatedly. Thank you so much, Nathan, and Qianye Qingping. You saved his life. His gratitude echoed through the clearing, a testament to the power of their remarkable abilities. Nathan's easy rapport with the ground-level shinobi was obvious, but he had no interest in pursuing it further. With a casual wave, he turned and left the group behind. Moments later, he found his way back to Jonin Qianye Qingping. Pausing before him, Nathan spoke deliberately. Jonin Qianye, you're well-versed in the fine lesion extraction technique, aren't you? I'd like to propose an exchange, your extraction technique for my newly refined palm fairy technique. Qianye Qingping tilted his head, studying Nathan's confident expression. Refined, you say? How much has it changed? Nathan allowed himself a small smile. I've optimized its chakra flow and condensed the hand seals. It heals more efficiently now. Qingping hovered on the edge of surprise, then murmured his assent without hesitation. Nathan had anticipated this. When he'd stabilized that injured Konoha shinobi earlier, he'd sensed Qingping's keen interest in his palm fairy technique, and here was the proof. Of course, as an Uchiha, Qingping already regarded the fine lesion extraction technique as commonplace, so granting face to a fellow ninja was easy enough. They exchanged nods, sealing the agreement in principle, but both understood that a true jutsu transfer would require scrolls, formal demonstrations, and official witnesses. For now, however, a handshake sufficed. With that, they parted ways, each carrying the promise of new power hidden beneath a simple pact of words. Ninjutsu, especially the medical arts, is too intricate to explain in a few offhand words. To truly master a technique, the user must commit every detail to paper or parchment. The exact hand seals, chakra flow diagrams, step-by-step instructions, timing notes, even all the precautions and potential side effects. Only once it's organized into a proper scroll or handbook can it be taught or passed on. You can't improvise that kind of knowledge in the heat of battle. Nathan didn't mind the wait. To him, the fine wound extraction technique was nothing more than a stopgap, an entry-level medical skill to cover his own shortcomings, not some hidden art of profound depth. He'd be perfectly happy to study it once someone else had taken the time to compile it into a formal text. For now, he knelt beside the injured shinobi Scatter, across the clearing, inhaled slowly and whispered, "Let's keep going." Chapter 335, a long half-moon time, flowed on like a river, and before Nathan knew it, the calendar had turned to early June. It had been over 2 weeks since the Hidden Mist Village launched its last raid on the forward base. 3 hours after the enemy's retreat, reinforcements from the rear garrison had arrived. But by the time they set out in pursuit, the Mist Ninja were long gone. Finding nothing, the support troops lingered at the base for 2 days before preparing to return to their posts. Yet they didn't leave empty-handed. A fresh detachment of nearly 100 ninjas was assigned to the forward outpost, both to replace losses from the recent skirmish and to bolster its defenses. With those added ranks, the garrison's strength swelled to an unprecedented 350 shinobi. Unwilling to concede, the Hidden Mist Village attempted several further strikes over the next fortnight. Each time, however, patrols stationed along the perimeter intercepted them before they could threaten the base itself. Despite their raids being repelled, the Mist Ninjas made it clear they had their sights fixed on one target, Nathan. Every time Nathan appeared beyond the base walls, the Hidden Mist operatives converged on him in force, if their numbers were sufficient. On occasions, when only a handful of enemy scouts showed up, they scattered at the first sign of trouble rather than engage. Still, their relentless focus on Nathan spoke volumes about his growing reputation and about the danger that lay ahead. Nathan's recent setback cost him dearly, but he refused to dwell on it. Day in and day out, he flitted between missions and intensive sword training without missing a single session. The non-stop battles and grueling practice paid off. His illusion sword technique and instant sword technique were advancing by leaps and bounds. That evening, on the reef-strewn beach just beyond the forward base, Nathan and Uchiha Tihuo faced off. As twilight settled, Nathan moved like a wraith, his long sword flashing in and out of Tihuo's sight. Each strike sang against the air, clang, ding-dong, echoing over the rocks. Tihuo's 3 Magatama Sharingan blazed to life. He hurled kunai in rapid succession, each blade intercepting one of Nathan's phantom attacks. Still, Nathan pressed the assault relentlessly. Within a minute, Tihuo faltered. A final feint left him off balance, and Nathan swept in, the tip of his sword resting coldly against Tihuo's throat. Tihuo froze, a stifled groan rising in his chest as he tasted fear. His heart thundered in his ears. "I surrender!" he gasped. But Nathan remained motionless, his blade unwavering. He didn't step back or acknowledge Tihuo's plea, as if he hadn't even heard it. The chill of the steel against his skin was Tihuo's only answer. Could it be? Tihuo's heart skipped a beat. He tilted his head just enough to pull the blade away from his neck, then spun around to look. There stood Nathan, perfectly still, eyes closed, his brow faintly furrowed in deep thought. A cold realization washed over Tihuo. He's doing it again. In their earlier sparring sessions, Nathan had slipped into this trance-like state several times, each time emerging with markedly improved swordsmanship. Tihuo felt a bitter sting. The distance between them was growing, wider than that between man and beast. Shaking off the frustration, he quietly backed away to a safe distance, intent on waiting out whatever meditation Nathan was undertaking. 30 seconds later, Nathan's eyelids fluttered open. Tihuo strode forward, blade relaxed but ready, and asked, "Nathan, you're not planning on getting stronger again, are you?" Nathan only smiled in response, and remained silent. Nathan wasn't surprised that Uchiha Tihuo had figured it out. He'd triggered these breakthroughs in front of him before, but those had all been thanks to instant swordsmanship. This time was different. Sheathing his blade, Nathan let his arm dance in a quick flourish. In an instant, he felt a newfound lightness in his wrists and fingertips, as if his mind Elda now fuse illusion and swordplay with perfect ease. There was only one explanation. His illusion sword technique had just leveled up. The sparring session with Tihuo had filled the last gap in his mastery. His skill had jumped from level 5, 1,155,000, to level 6, 110,000. Clang! Nathan slipped the sword home and gave Tihuo a nod. That's enough for today. I'm taking a break. Ignoring Tihuo's reaction, he strode to a nearby rocky ledge and settled down. Open panel. At his mental command, the familiar pale blue interface shimmered into view. Uchiha Nathan, age 12, physique 16, spirit 19, chakra 70,964, bloodline, Sharingan and Mangekyo 4,129, 50,000. Skills and techniques, chakra refinement technique, level 5, 1,439, 5,000, wind style, level 6, 3,405, 10,000, wind style, Rasen Shuriken, level 4, 462, 2,000, water style, water wall, level 4, 954, 2,000, water style, water dragon bullet, 721, water style, mist hidden art, level 1, 51, 200, shadow clone technique, the 4, 504 absorption technique, level 5, 4,150, Rasengan, level 6, 3,545, 10, palm immortal technique, level 8, 4,065, 50,000, chakra scalpel, level 5, 2,200, 5,000, microscopic extraction technique, level 1, 1,200, reflection of the heart technique, level 7, 19,094, 20,000, phantom sword, level 6, 110,000, instant sword, level 4, 1,100, 2,000, chakra control, level 5, 2,610, 5,000. It has been almost a month since Nathan set foot on the Hidden Mist battlefield. Though he'd been set back by a few days, Nathan's power has surged, especially his chakra reserves. After nearly a month of intensive training, his maximum chakra rose from 60,000 points to 70,000, a gain of more than 10,000. This leap not only brings him significantly closer to the Chitanla benchmark, but also greatly enhances his endurance. Nathan's most striking improvement, however, is in the reflection heart technique. Through relentless practice, he's pushed his proficiency from 14,486, 20,000 to 19,094, 20,000. Still officially level 7, he's now on the cusp of level 8. At his current pace, gaining 192 points per day, he'll break through in under 5 days. Once he reaches level 8, the technique's effect on accelerating his Mangekyo Sharingan's evolution will be even more pronounced. Today, every 3 proficiency points in the Reflection Heart technique yield 1 progress point toward unlocking the Mangekyo Sharingan. After promotion, that ratio could improve to 2-to-1 or even 1-to-1. Nathan's progress had been nothing short of astonishing. With every new battle and every hard-won victory, the strain on his Mangekyo Sharingan brought him ever closer to the next stage, Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. At this rate, what might once have taken him 2 or even 3 years could now happen in only a matter of months. His repertoire of water techniques grew stronger too. Both water style, water array wall, and water style, water dragon bullet technique advanced by a full level, their barriers denser and their dragon blasts more powerful and precise. On the sword side, his phantom sword technique climbed from level 4 to level 5, a reflection of his sharpening instincts and killer intent. Even more remarkable was his progress with the instant sword technique. Built on the foundation of his basic sword technique and bolstered by insights from the phantom sword, Nathan's growing affinity for wind style allowed him to push the instant sword from novice stage to level 4 in just half a month, his experience points leaping from 162 to 1,100. But Nathan wasn't done yet. 2 brand new skills now lay at his disposal. The first, water style, mist hidden technique, was one he had copied with his Sharingan during the fierce clash against Qing. The second, narrow trouble extraction technique, was the product of a special exchange with Chiba Qingping, a finely tuned ninjutsu that exploited an opponent's slightest weakness. Every addition to his arsenal not only made Nathan deadlier in combat, but also edged him closer to unlocking the full, eternal power of his Mangekyo Sharingan. Nathan frowned as he considered his situation. Every day he had only a fixed amount of chakra to draw on, and after honing the basics, he often had nothing left over to work on the two advanced techniques. He could only attempt them on the rare days when even his core training left some residual energy. Speaking of chakra, Nathan gently probed his inner reserves. More than 20 days had passed since he began using the Palm Immortal technique to fortify his body. With every practice session, he grew more attuned to the signs of his next physical breakthrough. At the slowest, that critical transformation would arrive in no more than half a month. At the fastest, barely 10 days remained. When that moment came, he would invoke the power of human control to shatter his current limits and trigger the metamorphosis. His physique attribute would surge, and along with it, both his maximum chakra capacity and his recovery rate would climb noticeably. Only then would he finally have the spare energy needed to fully train those two demanding skills. Chapter 336, Breaking News. Nathan, it's getting late. Shall we head back? Nathan had been lost in thought, calculating just how much his chakra recovery rate would jump after his next body transformation and the coming boost to his physique attribute. Uchiha Tihuo's voice pulled him from his daydream. He looked up to see the sun dipping toward the sea's horizon. With a stretch, he shut down his skill interface and stood. Yeah, let's go. Tihuo nodded, and the two men ran across the shallow waves toward the forward base. The seawater rushed around their ankles as Tihuo chattered on about their earlier sparring session, peppering Nathan with questions on technique and form. Nathan didn't mind. The young Uchiha's eagerness made him happy to share pointers. Besides, Tihuo's company was exactly what Nathan needed. He still wanted to rack up proficiency in both the Phantom Sword technique and the Instant Sword technique. Solo practice was fine, but nothing accelerated skill growth like real bouts with a worthy partner. As they raced back in the fading light, Nathan silently resolved to keep pushing both their limits. After all, the next breakthrough could come at any moment. Nathan watched Uchiha Tihuo sheath his blade, the sea breeze ruffling his dark hair. Tihuo's skill was nothing extraordinary, his physical strength was merely average, but his Sharingan made him a formidable sparring partner. That was precisely why Nathan never tired of training him. It wasn't every day you found someone with the Uchiha bloodline willing to learn. Nathan, Tihuo called, lowering his gaze. In the third round, you fainted from the side. I saw it clearly through my Sharingan. I knew it was a bluff, so how did it suddenly become a real strike? Nathan smiled, wiping salt spray from his forehead. Because I wanted you to think it was fake, he said, leaning on the hilt of his own sword. If I'd never intended to hit you, you wouldn't have reacted. Your guard would have been down. Tihuo frowned thoughtfully. Around them, the waves broke rhythmically against the shore, carrying away their words. After a few more parting remarks, the two warriors headed back to the forward base. Tihuo went off to inform their superiors of the progress in his training, while Nathan made his way to his modest courtyard residence. No sooner had he stepped inside than Nathan activated his Sharingan, sweeping its crimson glow across the walls, doors, and lantern-lit corridors. He scanned every corner, ensuring there were no hidden threats. Satisfied that the place was secure, he let the eye fall back into its normal state. He wasn't overly paranoid. Well, maybe just a little. But with his reputation rising, caution was wise. Rumor had it that the black market had placed his bounty at 32 million taels. That was only 3 million shy of Asuma's record, a testament to just how much Nathan's name now struck fear into shinobi and mercenaries alike. He closed the door behind him, content for once to be alone in the quiet of his simple home. Nathan wasn't sure whether the black market had learned that he'd seized the artisan village leader's legendary Kusanagi sword and jacked up the bounty on his own, or whether the hidden mist village had placed the order themselves. All he knew was that the price on his head had exploded, and there were plenty of bounty hunters out there eager to collect. He had to be more cautious than ever. Back at his lodgings, Nathan washed away the grime of the day, wolfed down a quick meal, and wasted no time launching into his evening training. First came the palm fairy technique, the same rigorous routine he'd practiced at dawn and midday, but with a daily quota of 240 precise repetitions. Daylight alone never sufficed. Once the final palm strike landed, he switched to the reflection heart technique, making up the repetitions he'd missed earlier. Night after night, he pushed himself well past the hour most men lay down to rest. As the minutes ticked by, the air in the small room grew colder, and the dull glow of the single lantern cast long shadows across the wooden floor. With every chambered breath and every strike of his palm, Nathan edged closer to his goal. Then, as always, without fanfare or notice, the clock hands met at 12, and midnight had arrived once more. Nathan finished the last phase of the reflection heart technique and let out a long, exhausted sigh. No sooner had he surrendered to sleep than a firm rap sounded on his door. Dong! 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 He bolted upright. Though fatigue still tugged at his muscles, his gaze snapped alert. Peering at the window, he saw the midnight sky studded with stars. He hadn't slept long. Again came the knock, more insistent this time. Whoever was outside clearly needed him. Nathan didn't hesitate. He yanked his robe from the chair, slipped into it, and cinched the belt with practiced fingers. He lifted the kusanagi sword from the table, the elegant blade gleaming faintly in the moonlight, and strode toward the courtyard gate. Before the third knock could come, the wooden doors creaked open. On the threshold stood a young shinobi from Konoha, his forehead protector pushed back on his head and anxiety etched on his face. Under the pale glow of the lantern, the ninja's eyes darted anxiously around the yard before settling on Nathan. "Nathan!" the visitor gasped, relief and urgency mingling in his voice. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but it's important. Your presence is requested at the council chamber immediately. There's been a development in the border patrol." Nathan held up a hand to forestall any more words. The kusanagi's hilt pressed comfortably against his palm, a reassuring weight. "Calm down. Tell me everything," he said quietly, stepping aside to admit the breathless messenger. As the gate swung shut behind them with a muted thud, Nathan braced himself for what lay ahead. Whatever crisis had brought this emissary to his door at such an hour, it was clear he wouldn't find rest again tonight. Nathan's gaze swept over the runner before him. It was one of the chunin attached to the Uchiha Jonin commanding the base. "Nathan Jonin," the chunin called out the moment he saw him. Nathan offered a curt nod. "Cut to the chase. What brings you here this late?" The chunin took a steadying breath, then reported in hurried tones. "About an hour ago, we received word from the border command that Kirigakure, the hidden mist village, launched a full-scale assault on the northern defense line. The fighting's fierce." "The northern defense line again?" Nathan muttered, frowning. He recalled all too well the ambush only a month ago. Kirigakure operatives had broken through at the same sector. It had been clear then that Danzo's covert ninjas were involved. Could this assault be another one of his schemes? He let the question hang, watching the messenger for any hint of clarification. The moonlight fell across the base's hastily fortified walls, reminding him that whatever was coming next, there was no turning back. Is this another of Danzo's schemes? Or did Kirigakure exploit that hidden threat we thought we'd cleared out last time? Nathan stared at the silent frontier, trying to piece it together. Whoever was behind this attack clearly had no fear of Konoha's defenses. The very reason for establishing the forward base here was to block the Mist Village from pushing the war into the Land of Fire. As long as this outpost stands, any assault on the three border defense lines can be flanked from the rear. Nathan refused to believe Kirigakure was unaware of that fact, yet they struck, which meant this was no half-hearted raid, and over the course of their patrols, they detected no scouts or spy teams from the mist, no movement at all. Whoever hit them must have come from far away, with meticulous planning and full confidence in success. The more he thought about it, the more tangled the mystery became. "Jonin Nathan?" The Konoha Chunin standing before him called, snapping him out of his reverie. Nathan blinked and shook off his daze. "Go on," he said. The Konoha Chunin glanced at him, apologetically. "That's all I know. The captain wants you in a meeting. If you have any questions, ask him then." "Understood," Nathan replied, nodding. "Let's go." He double-checked the courtyard gate to make sure it was secure, then hurried off toward the conference room alongside the chunin. Word of the summons spread quickly. Soon, several jonin, who'd been roused just as Nathan was, caught wind of the same orders and made their way over. By the time Nathan arrived, the conference room was already crowded with seasoned shinobi. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready for whatever awaited him. Chapter 337, Support Base. Nathan sat at the long conference table in the base's war room, his eyes drifting shut. To an outsider, he looked like he was resting, but inside, his senses were on high alert, ears straining to catch every snippet of conversation around him. So far, the officers debating strategy knew only fragments of the true situation. Before Nathan could draw any useful conclusions, the doors swung open. Uchiha Kazuo, the base's commander-in-chief, and one of the few jonin of note remaining here, strode in without preamble. Ever the picture of vigor and resolve, he took the head seat and cleared his throat. When he spoke, the room fell silent. The Mist Village has launched far more substantial attacks than we first estimated, Kazuo began, outlining troop movements, supply line disruptions, and confirmed sightings of high-ranking Mist ninjas near our borders. Their raids aren't mere skirmishes, they're probing assaults designed to weaken our flanks. We've received reports of multiple masked operatives, some matching the descriptions of known Mist elite. Nathan leaned forward. These fresh details confirmed his own suspicions. This was no small-scale raid. Border Command felt it too. That was why Nara Kigwang, our commander of the Central and Southern Defense Lines, refused to pull ninja out of those sectors for any extended redeployments, an obvious fear of being outmaneuvered by Mist deception. Kazuo's gaze swept the table. We must reinforce our eastern watchtowers immediately, bolster patrols along the river crossing, and prepare a rapid response unit. If the Mist truly intends a full-scale invasion, we need every asset on standby. Heads nodded around the table. Nathan let the information settle. The next moves would be critical, and he intended to be ready. But the northern defense line couldn't be left unguarded, so the burden fell squarely on their shoulders. Headquarters had just ordered an immediate detachment of troops to strike the hidden Mist Village's assault force from the rear. At the news, a Nara clan special jonin snapped. "You want to strip our defenses? What if that's exactly what the enemy expects?" The room went silent, then thoughtful frowns spread. If headquarters feared the central and southern lines being outflanked, why not theirs? Their sector was arguably the most critical of all. Another jonin nodded. "He's right. The enemy's real target could be our base. Don't forget what happened 2 weeks ago. We have to plan for the long haul." One by one, the others voiced agreement. "It's a real possibility. We must stay on guard." Soon the conference chamber buzzed with debate. Then a sharp voice cut through the rising clamor. "Quiet!" Uchiha Kazuo swept the room with a single glance. At once, conversation died away. He cleared his throat. "Headquarters has taken your concerns into account," he began. "This time we can spare only 100 shinobi for the northern defense line. The rest will remain on full alert, guarding against any surprise assault from the hidden Mist Village." A seasoned Konoha jonin frowned. 100? Is that really enough? "According to our latest intelligence," Kazuo replied, "the Mist forces number between 400 and 500. Their objective is to divert our troops and slip through to the rear. Can 100 men hold them back?" A hush fell over the officers. Then Kazuo turned to Nathan. "Quality over quantity," he said. "Headquarters specifically asked for you to lead this team, Nathan. Any objections?" Before Nathan could answer, a voice piped up from the back. "With Jonin Nathan in command, there's no doubt we'll succeed." Another officer nodded. "We've seen Jonin Nathan in action. 100 men under him will be more than a match for that many Mist ninjas." Nathan met their eyes coolly. A faint spark glinted in his gaze. He inclined his head once, acknowledging their confidence. "Very well," he said. "I'll prepare my squad immediately. We'll hold the line." Nathan didn't object to the mission itself, but he hated being roasted alive by public opinion. The two men railing at him sang from the same hymn sheet, insinuating he'd be betraying everyone if he declined. He wasn't sure whether they were simply stirring trouble or taking orders from some unseen puppeteer, but their motives were anything but honorable. Around them, the other shinobi looked on indifferently. each absorbed in his own concerns. It was a stark reminder this world didn't revolve around him, and everyone here guarded their own interests. Taking a deep breath, Nathan forced himself to calm down. He met Uchiha Kazuo's gaze and said, "All right, I'll lead the team, but I'll need a handful of elite ninjas to back me up." "Speak their names," Kazuo replied curtly. Nathan wasted no time. He named 4 jonin, among them the 2 who'd just been badgering him. "Captain," the pair protested, leaping to their feet. But before they could say more, Kazuo held up a hand to silence them. "Don't worry," Kazuo said to Nathan. "Those 4 will be on your team." Nathan heard the faint murmur among the 2 shinobi eyeing him. Kazuo noticed their smirks, but chose to ignore them. In his eyes, Uchiha prodigies needed to endure hardship. Overprotected talents never truly grew. If Nathan decided to stand his ground, Kazuo would back him up. After all, an Uchiha ninja couldn't be pushed around without consequence. For now, he nodded to Nathan's preference and assigned those 4 to the support unit alongside him. With that settled, Nathan collected the mission scroll, bowed politely, and withdrew. Their departure was set for 30 minutes later. He planned to return to his quarters to gather everything he might need. Though he had no concrete evidence, his instincts warned him this assignment would be far from simple. Half an hour passed in a blur. Nathan arrived at the southern section of the base, where the dock sprawled under the overcast sky, ready to begin what lay ahead. Under the gleaming starlight, Nathan and 100 shinobi slipped aboard 2 unassuming passenger vessels bound for the Land of Fire's northern defense line. The ships cut through the inky sea, their sails snapping softly in the salt-laden breeze as they carried the covert squad toward the enemy border. No sooner had the vessels vanished into the night than the water's surface rippled violently. A massive shark erupted from the depths, its jaws parting like a living cavern. From that yawning mouth stepped a lone figure dressed head to toe in the black garb of an Anbu operative. A sleek mask obscured his face, its 4 undulating stripes evoking swirling mist, the unmistakable emblem of the hidden mist village. The Anbu agent cast a covert glance toward Nathan's departing ships. He withdrew a tightly rolled scroll from his robes, swiftly inscribing a handful of secret characters with ink as dark as the sea. His fingers wove a series of seals midair, and almost instantly a smaller shark surfaced at his side, obedient and watchful. Nodding once, the operative placed the scroll into the creature's open maw, ruffled its dorsal fin in a silent salute, and released it back into the black waters. Then, without hesitation, he dipped beneath the waves and disappeared into the cavernous mouth of the original Leviathan. With a final explosive leap, the great shark arced skyward before plunging back into the depths, churning the surface into froth, and then fading into the abyss. High above, Nathan's fleet pressed on, unaware that their trail had already been spotted by unfriendly eyes. Even if he knew someone was stalking them, it would matter little. Danger was nothing new to a shinobi, and certainly nothing to give him pause. Nathan estimated there was at least a 90% chance their voyage would end in disaster. Even discounting the unpredictable antics of the 2 companions aboard, who might turn on them of their own volition or under someone else's orders, Kirigakure village would never let them slip through unscathed. Whether Kirigakure's assault on the northern defenses was a genuine offensive or merely a feint, those 500 troops were real enough. The moment Nathan's group arrived, they'd be caught in a pincer trap, attacked front and rear. In such an ambush, total annihilation was almost certain. And even if Kirigakure's grand strategy eventually succeeded, they could never justify the loss of so many men. A blockade was all but guaranteed. There was one slim alternative. Their enemies might let them pass, then quietly withdraw before any fighting began, avoiding casualties altogether. Perhaps Kirigakure's leadership secretly wished for that outcome. Nathan, however, wasn't counting on it. Ultimately, how things unfold will depend on what happens next. Many thanks to our fellow reader. It's a good book for the generous 500-coin startup gift. Chapter 338, Enemy Attack. By the time Nathan glanced up, 4 hours had slipped away. The starlight had faded, and a pale veil of dawn, what sailors call fish-belly white, stretched across the horizon. He stood on the deck, the cool sea breeze tugging at his cloak. For the first time since they'd left port, He allowed himself to relax, breathing in the scent of salt and spray. After a moment's inspection confirmed that nothing stirred on the glassy water, he retreated below decks to his cabin. The gentle slap of waves against the hull was the only sound as Nathan settled onto the floor, closing his eyes. He pressed his palms together, forming an intricate hand seal, and resumed his chakra training. Minutes stretched into an hour, and a thin mist curled around him. Nothing unusual, he thought. The sea often carried fog at first light. Outside, the ship's watchmen noticed the mist growing unnaturally dense. At first, they shrugged it off as a morning haze, but when the fog thickened to an opaque wall, alarm bells rang. A sentry sprinted up to the bridge and sounded the emergency whistle. Sharp blasts split the dawn on both passenger ships. In cabins and common rooms alike, Konoha ninjas bolted upright, weapons in hand, hearts pounding. "All hands on deck!" came the shout, and armor clattered as men and women rushed for the open air. Back in his cabin, Nathan felt a chill ripple through the mist. He opened his eyes, sensing hostility in the air. Before he could rise, there was a sudden, furious pounding at the door. "Dong! Dong!" The raps came again, each one more insistent than the last. Nathan's hand-sealed form dissolved as he slid to his feet, chakra coiling around him like a living thing. Someone on the other side cried, "Sir, you need to come out, now!" Nathan squared his shoulders, steeling himself for whatever lay beyond that door. The enemy, it seemed, had arrived. Nathan opened his eyes, glanced toward the door, and called, "Come in." The door swung open, and Uchiha Tiehuo stepped inside, his expression tight with unease. Nathan had insisted on bringing Tiehuo along as a trusted subordinate, so seeing him look so unsettled only deepened Nathan's concern. "Tiehuo, what's wrong?" Nathan asked. Tiehuo drew a breath. "There's a massive white fog outside. It's thick enough to trap us." "A white mist?" Nathan echoed, his pulse quickening. He rose from his seat and followed Tiehuo onto the deck. The night air was cold, and the deck was crowded with anxious ninjas staring into the swirling haze. One Chunin was already weaving his hands through the motions of a wind-release jutsu, hoping to blow the mist away. For a moment the fog peeled back like a curtain, but as soon as the wind died, it drifted right back, undisturbed. Nathan narrowed his eyes. The faint glow of lanterns threw eerie shadows across the deck, but to Nathan, the real danger lay hidden in the fog itself. He closed his eyes and let his chakra extend outward, probing every swirl of the mist. Sure enough, he detected a subtle but unmistakable presence of water-nature chakra infused throughout the fog. Nathan opened his eyes, resolve hardening on his features. "This isn't any ordinary mist. Get ready. Things are about to get very interesting." Nathan hovered at the edge of the battlefield, his senses alert to every shift in the thick gray mist. Having fully mastered the water release, hidden mist technique, he knew immediately that this was no ordinary fog. It was the product of that very jutsu. Worse still, it had been cast by several shinobi working in concert. A single user could never blanket such an expanse. Given the mission he was on, there was only one conclusion. Kirigakure's ninjas were lying in wait. A low chuckle escaped Nathan's lips. He'd secretly hoped that the remote odds would be in his favor, that the Mist Village forces might not turn up. But they had, and his hunch had been foolish. Their appearance here meant that the northern defense line was now fully engaged, with no simple path of retreat for the Kirigaku attackers. A brutal clash lay ahead. Well, at least this wouldn't be a wasted outing. He cast a sidelong glance toward the two elite jonin assigned to accompany him. Stolid and unmoving, they'd been pressed into his escort by the higher-ups, an irksome formality he could have lived without. Yet now, faced with the mist-shrouded threat, Nathan admitted to himself that their presence might tip the balance in the coming fight. With a steadying breath, he readied himself for whatever lay concealed in that swirl of mist. Maybe we can seize this chance to get rid of them. The thought flickered through Nathan's mind for only a heartbeat before he snuffed it out. He knew full well that, given the strength of his two opponents, he could have dealt with them easily, if he wanted to. But first things first, resolve the immediate crisis. With that settled, Nathan sprang onto the ship's deck. He drew in a steady breath, his hands weaving swiftly through the seals. "Wind release, great breakthrough," he thundered. A rush of chakra coalesced around him, infusing the air with raw, swirling power. In a single furious exhalation, he unleashed a colossal tornado from his mouth. The vortex tore through the rolling white mist, ripping sea spray from the waves and hurling it skyward. Beneath the whirlwind's ferocious force, the ocean exploded into towering walls of water that crashed outward in every direction. The gale howled like an unleashed storm, sweeping across the deck with devastating might. Below, the Konoha Shinobi stood frozen, mouths agape, struck speechless by the sheer magnitude of Nathan's attack. Most of the passengers had witnessed Nathan in action before. His peerless swordsmanship left a deep impression on them, but few knew he was equally skilled in ninjutsu. Watching him now, they realized just how wrong they'd been. Yet Nathan's expression remained calm, almost stern. Ahead of him, the tornado of wind he'd summoned dispersed the white mist, only for it to coalesce again within seconds, thicker than ever. Clearly, someone had anticipated his tactics. Before Nathan could prepare another wind vortex, a sudden whoosh split the air. He squinted into the fog and saw dozens of kunai hurtling toward the two transport ships from every direction. Closer inspection revealed ominous talismanic seals etched onto their bodies. Explosive kunai, meant to obliterate the vessels and send everyone overboard. Nathan's heart raced, but he wasted no time. "Everyone, brace yourselves and protect the ship," he shouted. They still had over an hour to reach their destination. If these bombs struck home, the only way forward would be to swim. With that grim thought spurring him on, Nathan leapt into action once more, determined to shield his comrades from the hidden ambush. Any hope of sustaining a prolonged sea assault under these conditions had all but vanished. Not everyone aboard possessed Nathan's seemingly boundless chakra, able to sprint across rolling waves for hours before launching into a full-scale clash. Most of the shinobi with him were of mid or low rank. Expecting them to endure such a grueling raid was unrealistic. Above all, the ship itself had to remain intact. If it went down, every sacrifice so far would be in vain. Nathan and his squad shared that concern. At his command, each shinobi flung their kunai into the air and met the enemy projectiles head-on. Mere moments before, Nathan had unleashed Wind Release Great Breakthrough to tear through the dense white fog. Though the mist was already coiling back around the vessel, visibility remained far better than before, and everyone's aim improved dramatically. When the barrage ended, only a handful of kunai were lodged in the hull. The deadliest weapons, the ones rigged with explosive seals, had drawn the team's full attention. None slipped through the net. Each was knocked aside, sent tumbling into the churning sea, where it detonated harmlessly against the waves. The ship creaked but held firm. As the echoes of the explosions faded, Nathan's squad braced themselves. They had weathered the first onslaught. Now they steeled for whatever came next. Nathan aimed into the swirling mist, chanting under his breath. One by one, fiery spheres materialized above his outstretched palm, each explosion carving a path through the oppressive fog. Encouraged by the clearing, he sealed his fingers again and unleashed his next technique, Wind Release Great Breakthrough. This time, Nathan drew nearly 3,000 chakra points into the jutsu, teetering on the edge of his personal limit. The payoff was instantaneous. As the final seal snapped into place, the air around him shuddered. In a blast as forceful as a typhoon's eye, a torrent of howling wind burst from his mouth. Opaque mist shredded into ribbons, scattering like leaves in a gale. Below, the Konoha shinobi aboard the transport boat were caught in the backwash. Some lost their footing on deck and tumbled into the churning sea. Others clung desperately to railings, faces streaked with spray. Nathan steadied himself against the deck's heaving planks, heart pounding, but satisfied. With the fog torn aside and his comrades temporarily safe from being washed overboard, he prepared for whatever emerged next from the cleared horizon. Chapter 339, Snow Wind. When Nathan finished sealing off their breaths, the howling wind abruptly died down. Everyone on the deck wavered as the sudden calm threw them off balance, and those who'd been swept overboard scrambled back onto the ship. The white mist that had swirled menacingly around them vanished without a trace. Nathan had poured every ounce of his strength into neutralizing the Mist Ninja's secret technique, finally breaking their hold on the battlefield. But victory in dispelling the fog did not mean their opponents were beaten. Before the crew could catch their breath, a massive swell rose on the horizon and charged toward the ship. Nathan activated his Sharingan and focused on the rippling water ahead. He made out several mist ninjas standing waist-deep, arms outstretched toward the sea. Clearly, they were pooling their chakra to unleash a colossal water-release jutsu. Even from a distance, the incoming wave radiated crushing force. If it struck the ship, the hull might shatter under the pressure, and any of them who stood atop it would be thrown overboard again, or worse. A murmur of alarm ran through Nathan's comrades, but none of them panicked. They were veteran shinobi, not greenhorns. "Brace yourselves," Nathan barked, stepping to the bow. His Sharingan traced the chakra currents shimmering in the water, calculating the moment of impact. Around him, the crew squared their stances, ready to withstand or counterstrike. The ocean heaved as the waves surged closer, its towering crest illuminated by the moonlight. In that tense instant, every ninja on deck held their breath, prepared to meet the snow wind's watery onslaught head-on. Moments after they spotted the towering wave bearing down on them, several shinobi sprang to their feet. With precise hand seals, they unleashed a water release technique, water wall formation. Instantly, tall walls of seawater surged upward, shielding the two passenger ships from the oncoming tide. In open ocean, Earth-style ninjutsu, normally more chakra-efficient against water, was all but impossible, so the defenders relied on the element at hand. Boom! The colossal waves slammed into the water walls with a thunderous roar. For a heartbeat, the shields quivered, then shuddered to pieces. Despite shattering so quickly, the water wall formation had done its job. By the time the wave reached them, its fury was spent. It merely rocked the ships, leaving them intact. Before Nathan could even give his orders, a jonin on the neighboring vessel barked commands to a dozen chunin. In unison they leapt over the railing, dissolving into the surf and propelling themselves forward on technique-enhanced water currents. Their target, the fog-cloaked ninja lurking just beyond the breaker line. Standing on deck, Nathan scanned the churning sea, every muscle tensed. Though their temporary barrier had held, the real battle was far from over, and the mist-shrouded figure drifting ahead may well turn the tide against them. Kunai rained down from every direction. Nathan refused to believe the enemy had only deployed a handful of fighters on the surface. Most of them had to be hiding beneath the waves. But after the furious momentum of his wind escape, great breakthrough, their position couldn't be comfortable. If they'd been in good shape, they would have struck much earlier. He activated his Sharingan, its crimson tomoe slicing through the spray. Far below, half a dozen shadowy forms were surging upward, cutting through the water like torpedoes. Nathan narrowed his eyes, waiting for the perfect moment. Hands snapping into a precise seal, he let out a calm chant. Flames roared to life around him. Fire release. Phoenix Immortal Fire Technique. In the past, he had always rushed this jutsu, dumping out as many fireballs as he could muster in one massive volley. Today, however, he tempered his speed. One by one, brilliant spheres of flame condensed in midair, each honed to razor sharpness. Then, with effortless control, he sent them spinning outward. The first fireball streaked down, detonating air, against a mist ninja's shoulder as the man broke the surface. Before another could react, a second incinerated his legs. A third found its mark in a rushing torso. Like lightning-fast whack-a-mole, each flaming orb darted to its new target. Mist curled from burning water and flesh. The remaining shinobi hesitated, their assault faltering under Nathan's relentless precision. High above the churning sea, he stood ready, Sharingan eyes blazing, prepared for whoever dared to surface next. Thanks to the Sharingan's keen perception, Nathan anticipated the Mist Ninja's ambush and struck first, catching nearly half of them off guard. His timely counterattack not only derailed their sneak attack plan, but also revealed their positions and movements to the Konoha shinobi aboard the ship. With that advantage secured, Konoha warriors swarmed in, cutting off the intruders before they could regroup. Within minutes, the boarding party found themselves encircled, indeed besieged, by a force that outnumbered them 2 or 3 to 1. Nathan counted no more than 30 mist ninjas. Surrounded on all sides, their defeat seemed only a matter of time. Yet Nathan remained on high alert. There had to be more behind this assault. After all, they were deep at sea with no islands or reefs nearby, and these mist operatives showed none of the wariness you'd expect from a long voyage. In all likelihood, a second enemy vessel lay hidden in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. Nathan scanned the open water, the moonlight dancing on the waves, but saw nothing. Yet. Nathan frowned, weighing his options. Either his assessment of the situation was wrong, or the enemy had another trick up their sleeve, something he hadn't anticipated. If he'd simply miscalculated, there was no cause for alarm. At worst, he'd wasted a few precious moments. But if they truly wielded an unseen method, he needed to proceed with caution, for the unknowable was always the most dangerous threat. He scanned the horizon once more. Far out at sea, a Kirigakure warship drifted silently across the waves. Its hull was coated in a faint, crystalline frost, so artfully applied that those inside could peer directly out into the ocean, while anyone observing from outside saw only churning water and the ship's distant stern. It was a masterful camouflage, relying entirely on the way ice crystals refracted light, and it demanded almost no chakra to maintain. No wonder the illusion had gone undetected. Now, only one mystery remained. Where had the ice come from? Suddenly, a staccato rhythm of footsteps echoed nearby, thump, 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 growing louder with each heartbeat. Nathan's hand shot to the hilt of his sword. Someone was coming. A Kirigakure shinobi rushed up to the ship's bow and, voice trembling with urgency, reported, "Lord Yukikaze, our surprise attack has failed." Yukikaze whirled on him, lips curling in annoyance. "Damn it," he muttered. With calm precision, he formed a hand seal. A swirl of chakra gathered in his palm, solidifying into a flawless mirror of ice so white it seemed to glow. The shinobi at his side couldn't hide a flash of envy. Such perfect craftsmanship was rare even among Kirigakure's finest, but Yukikaze paid him no mind. Cradling the icy disc in both hands, Yukikaze completed the final seal and flung it into the air. Instantly, the mirror's surface sprang to life, projecting a live image of the distant battlefield. Every movement and formation appeared with clarity sharper than any telescope. "Even after all these years," the shinobi breathed, stepping forward, "your ice surveillance technique never ceases to amaze." Yukikaze allowed himself a small, satisfied chuckle. "Nor will it," he replied. Shuifeng chuckled and said, "You have to understand, the Snow Clan's secret ninjutsu isn't something ordinary shinobi can match." In fact, Shuifeng was no ordinary ninja. He was a shinobi of Kirigakure's Snow Clan, one who had awakened the rare bloodline limit known as Ice Escape. This wasn't the dark era of the fourth Mizukage, Yagura, when Uchiha Obito manipulated the Hidden Mist village into persecuting every bloodline family. Although the village's policies remained brutal, they no longer targeted Kekkei Genkai users for outright extermination. As a result, the bloodline clans had begun to re-emerge from the shadows. Even the once nearly extinct Snow Clan now walked openly among its people, and Shuifeng stood here as proof. After his laugh subsided, Shuifeng's brow furrowed. He gazed into the polished mirror before him, where Nathan, seemingly sensing something, had lifted his head to stare at the sky beyond. Chapter 340, Snowstorm. Nathan perched on the deck of the transport ship, scanning the roiling skies for any sign of an ambush. Then, like a whisper at the edge of his consciousness, the sensation struck him, a hidden observer probing his mind. It felt eerily familiar, just as it had the last time Aburame Ryoma used his secret technique, eliminate bad bugs, to spy on him. Frowning, Nathan closed his eyes and unleashed the full force of his spirit chakra, all 19 points of it, into a sweeping mental probe. In an instant, everyone on deck shivered as though an invisible weight had settled on their shoulders. They exchanged uneasy glances, mouths going dry, but none dared speak. Nathan ignored them. He knew that any remote monitoring ninjutsu must be tethered by chakra. If he could trace that chakra trail back to its source, he could unmask the caster. Floating above the chaos of snow and steel, he let his inner awareness sift through every stray eddy of chakra in the air. Each subtle current, each tremor of energy, he followed them like footprints in fresh snow. His eyes snapped open. There, buried within the howling blizzard, lay a faint but unmistakable chakra signature, distant but distinct. A hidden enemy, cloaked both by the storm and by a cunning jutsu, was watching him right now. Nathan's lips curved into a determined smile. Let them hide. He would draw them out, and when they revealed themselves, he would be waiting. Nathan's eyes snapped open. He fixed his gaze on a patch of sea to the northwest and whispered, "There." With that, he fully activated his Sharingan. Though the ice crystal invisibility technique was reputedly flawless at long range, it couldn't hold up once Nathan knew where to look. Through the Sharingan's penetrating red iris, he discerned subtle ripples in the water, an anomaly betraying the hidden ship's position. It felt as if two pairs of eyes locked through an ice-forged mirror. Aboard the mist-hidden ship, Xuefeng's expression shifted abruptly. Under the glare of scarlet eyes, his heart stuttered, a cold dread snaking down his spine. Nathan's reputation preceded him. He had slain countless powerful warriors. Even confident in his own ice-release bloodline limit, Xuefeng couldn't help shrinking before a master of such caliber. They'd boasted of Nathan's unrivaled swordsmanship, but his perceptive prowess, it seemed, was every bit as deadly. Nathan hovered just beyond the warship's sensor range, heart pounding as he struggled to piece together what had happened. "How did they find me?" he muttered, eyes narrowing at the vessel's silhouette growing larger by the second. Aboard the ship, Commander Xuefeng's face paled. For a moment, her thoughts scattered like mist in the wind. "Sister Xuefeng," hissed the mist ninja at her side, voice tight. "Has he really tracked us down?" Xuefeng pressed a hand to her forehead, where a slick of sweat had formed. Before the first shot was even fired, fear had taken root, and that shamied her more than anything. "Damn it," she cursed under her breath. With a swift gesture, she deactivated the ship's stealth field. "All units, maximum speed, battle stations now!" "Aye, Commander." The mist ninja snapped to attention and streamed the order through the ship's comm array. Across the waves of space, Nathan watched the enemy frigate shed its cloak and bear down on him. They'd realized he'd uncovered their trail and dropped any pretense of stealth. Perfect. He wouldn't have to risk sneaking in. Let them show their hand first. Nathan knew they needed to prepare immediately. He summoned the nearby Konoha Shinobi, ordered them to disengage from the ongoing skirmish, and fall back to set up defenses for the incoming enemy. They moved just in time, only to be struck before either side could properly clash. As the Mist's warship closed to within 100 meters, the air around them suddenly chilled by several degrees. Snowflakes began to swirl, whipped by a biting wind, until it felt as if a blizzard had swept into their position. The darkness and driving snow obscured everything within 100 meters, and even hardened shinobi found themselves shivering uncontrollably. What made the situation deadly was what happened next. In the blink of an eye, those harmless snowflakes transformed into razor-sharp snowflake-shaped ice crystal shurikens. The Konoha ninja, caught off guard, had no time to react. Many were cut down or grievously wounded before they could raise a defensive barrier. A few managed to deflect one or two shurikens, but when hundreds, possibly thousands, rained down at once, there was no stopping them all. Within moments, the field was littered with fallen comrades, and Nathan realized their battle was far from over. Seeing the ice crystal shurikens coalescing into a deadly storm overhead, Nathan wasted no time. He formed a precise hand seal and unleashed his signature ninjutsu, wind style, great breakthrough. In theory, fire techniques would have been ideal, enough heat to melt the ice instantly, but the fire-style jutsu Nathan had mastered couldn't cover so vast an area fast enough. With no other choice, he poured every last drop of chakra into creating a raging tornado, relying on sheer force to scatter the projectiles. The result was instantaneous. A fierce gale tore through the sky, shredding the blizzard into drifting flakes until the entire icy barrage dissolved into nothingness. Only then did Nathan allow himself to breathe. On the deck of the Kirigakure warship stood a strikingly handsome man, arms crossed as he surveyed the aftermath. Nathan's mind raced through every scrap of intel he'd gathered on the hidden mist village. He hadn't guessed wrong. This was undoubtedly a member of the Kirigakure Snow Clan. Nathan watched with sharp interest as the hurricane of ice swirled around Xuefeng. Only a shinobi who'd awakened the ice-release bloodline limit could summon a blizzard of this scale. He thought back to Bai's secret technique, the magic mirror ice crystal, and felt confirmation that true power is born of conflict. Xuefeng's blizzard, spanning over 100 meters, threatened every mid to low-rank shinobi who dared approach. Yet against an elite opponent, its impact would be limited. By contrast, Bai's magic mirror ice crystal was a precise, single-target strike, capable of tearing through the defenses of even the highest-ranking ninja, provided its wielder was skilled enough. In gaming parlance, Xuefeng's technique functioned as a broad AoE skill, while Bai's was a focused, lethal attack. What Nathan still didn't know was just how potent this Snow Clan descendant's single-target power could be. As these thoughts raced through his mind, Xuefeng's hands snapped into seals with lightning speed. Crystalline wind roared as a massive dragon of ice formed before them, its scales glittering like frozen sapphires. The beast stretched its wings, each feather a razor-sharp shard, and let out a thunderous roar that echoed through the battlefield. Nathan braced himself. Whatever came next, he knew this duel was about to reach its true turning point. Xuefeng crouched astride the ice dragon's back, urging the beast into a full-speed charge straight at Nathan. Sensing the bone-chilling blast of frost swooping toward him, Nathan didn't hesitate for a second. He thrust his hands forward and called upon his ninjutsu, fire style, dragon flame technique. A roaring jet of flame burst from Nathan's mouth, spiraling into the shape of a blazing fire dragon that lunged at the oncoming ice dragon. Xuefeng reacted in a heartbeat. He snarled orders, and the ice dragon reared its head back before unleashing a searing stream of icy air. The cold struck Nathan's fire dragon like a jagged spear, instantly plummeting its temperature and muting its fiery glow. Despite the sudden chill, the fire dragon held its form, teeth bared and wings beating defiantly. Xuefeng's eyes flickered with surprise, and he quickly signaled his mount to pull back out of the blast's path. Both dragons circled warily, preparing for the next exchange.